I didn't mean to call her baby. The crystal champagne flute nearly slipped from my hand the second the word left my mouth. Around me, the entire ballroom seemed to freeze. Gilded chandeliers, designer gowns, men in $1,000 suits, all of it suspended in a single horrified breath. I was just temporary staff, a nobody in a rented vest, and I'd just used a pet name on Elena Varelli, the woman who could buy and sell half the people in this room before breakfast. But here's the thing nobody expected. She didn't fire me. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she looked straight at me with those dark, unreadable eyes and said 5 words that would rip my life wide open. Meet me before you leave. If you want to know how a single father working 3 jobs ends up tangled in the world of millionaires, stick around until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The mistake happened at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I know because I checked my watch right after. The way you do when your brain's trying to find something solid to grab onto while everything else spins out of control. The Whitmore Hotel ballroom was packed with Seattle's elite, tech executives, real estate moguls, people whose net worth had more zeros than my daughter's math homework. I was there because Event Staff Pro had called me that morning, desperate to fill a last-minute opening. $50 an hour to carry trays and keep my mouth shut. I'd have done it for half that. My daughter Mia needed new shoes. The good kind. The ones that didn't fall apart after 2 months. That's the calculation you make when you're 32 and raising a 6-year-old alone. Every shift is measured in shoes, groceries, the heating bill. The event was some kind of networking mixer for a venture capital firm. I didn't understand half the conversations floating past me. Blockchain. Series B funding. Disruptive market positioning. The words sounded expensive and empty at the same time, like designer packaging with nothing inside. I'd been carrying champagne for 3 hours when I saw her. Elena Varelli stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, backlit by the city lights. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my truck, her dark hair pulled back in a way that looked effortless but definitely wasn't. Everything about her screamed control, the way she held her glass, the slight tilt of her head as she listened to the balding man talking at her, the small, polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'd been briefed about her. Everyone working the event had been. That's Elena Varelli, Marcus, the crew supervisor, had said during the setup. Self-made millionaire, started with nothing, built a consulting empire in 8 years. She's the keynote speaker tonight, so if she needs anything, you move fast and you don't screw it up. I'd nodded like I understood, but honestly, I didn't care about her origin story. Rich people love to pretend they'd clawed their way up from nothing, but nothing for them usually meant their parents only had one vacation home. Still, there was something different about the way she moved through that room. She didn't seek attention. She deflected it. When people approached her, she gave them exactly enough to feel acknowledged, then extracted herself with surgical precision. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The balding man was still talking, his hand gestures getting bigger, his voice getting louder. I drifted closer with my tray, just in case she needed a refill as an excuse to escape. That's when it happened. She turned slightly, and her elbow caught the edge of her champagne glass. It tipped, spilling down the front of her dress in a thin golden stream. The balding man kept talking, oblivious. I moved without thinking, grabbed a napkin from my tray, stepped forward, reached out to blot the spill, and my mouth opened before my brain could stop it. Careful, baby. The words just came out. Soft, automatic, the way you'd talk to Mia when she knocked over her juice at breakfast. Not flirtatious, not presumptuous, just human. But the effect was immediate. Every conversation within 10 feet died. Heads turned. The balding man's mouth hung open mid-sentence. Elena's eyes locked onto mine, wide with something I couldn't read. Surprise, maybe, or the split second before anger arrives. I froze, napkin still extended like an idiot. My voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I was just... She blinked once. Twice. Then, impossibly, she took the napkin from my hand. Thank you, she said. Her voice was quieter than I expected. Controlled, but not cold. The moment stretched too long. I became aware of how close I was standing, how many people were watching, how thoroughly I'd just screwed up the easiest job in the world. Marcus was going to kill me. Event Staff Pro was going to blacklist me. I just lost $50 an hour because I couldn't keep my mouth shut around someone who could probably sue me for emotional distress. You're welcome, I managed, then backed away so fast I nearly collided with another server. I retreated to the service hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Set the tray down on a prep table and pressed my palms against my eyes. Stupid. So goddamn stupid. Mia's shoes floated through my mind, getting further out of reach with every second. Hey! Marcus appeared beside me, his face tight with barely controlled fury. What the hell was that? I screwed up. Yeah, you think? He kept his voice low, but the anger vibrated through every word. You don't touch the guest. You definitely don't talk to them like they're your girlfriend. Do you have any idea who that was? Elena Virelli. I know. Then you know she could have this entire event shut down with one phone call. She could get our company blacklisted from every venue in the city. Marcus ran a hand over his face. Pack up. You're done. I nodded. Didn't argue. There was nothing to say. I was halfway to the staff exit when I heard my name. Not my name. I was wearing a generic name tag that said staff, but someone was asking for me specifically. The server who'd been working the west side of the room jogged up, slightly out of breath. You Caleb Hayes? Yeah. Ms. Virelli wants to see you before you leave. The floor seemed to tilt. What? She asked for you by name, said to send you to the Cascade Room. It's the private lounge on the second floor. Marcus appeared behind me, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. She asked for him? By name, the server repeated. How does she even... I started, then remembered the sign-in sheet we'd all filled out that morning. She must have gotten the staff roster. Marcus grabbed my shoulder, his grip tight enough to hurt. I don't know what you did, but you fix it. You apologize, you grovel, you do whatever she wants. Got it? I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The walk to the second floor felt like climbing toward a gallows. My mind spun through every possible scenario, each worse than the last. She was going to threaten legal action. She was going to demand I be fired, publicly, as an example. She was going to... The Cascade Room was smaller than I expected, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with a few leather chairs arranged around a gas fireplace. Empty except for Elena, who stood by the window with her back to the door. Ms. Virelli? My voice came out smaller than I intended. She turned. Up close, without the crowd and the noise, she looked different. Younger, somehow, despite the sharp angles of her face. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind you get from squinting at screens or smiling less than you should. Caleb Hayes. She said it like she was testing the name. Single father, age 32, currently working 3 part-time jobs to make rent. She tilted her head slightly. Am I close? My stomach dropped. How do you... I make it my business to know who's in the room with me, especially when they call me baby in front of 100 witnesses. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't mean it like... It was just instinct. My daughter, she's 6, and I'm always... I stopped, realizing I was rambling. It won't happen again. No, Elena agreed. It won't. She crossed the room slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood, stopped about 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the faint scar above her left eyebrow, the slight asymmetry in her face that somehow made her more striking. I'm not going to sue you if that's what you're worried about. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by deeper confusion. Then why? Because you did something nobody else in that room would have done. She studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You treated me like a person. I blinked. What? The man I was talking to? He'd been explaining cryptocurrency to me for 20 minutes, never asked if I was interested, never noticed he was boring me to tears, never even registered when I spilled champagne on myself. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You noticed, you helped. You used a term of endearment that was completely inappropriate and somehow exactly what I needed to hear. I'm not following. Elena walked to one of the leather chairs and sat down, gesturing for me to take the one across from her. I did, perching on the edge like I might need to run at any moment. I'm going to make you an offer, Caleb, and I need you to hear me out before you answer. Okay? I attend approximately 30 high-profile events per year. Galas, conferences, private dinners. These gatherings are crucial for my business, but they're also exhausting in ways most people don't understand. Everyone wants something. Everyone's performing. Everyone's trying to prove they belong. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes never leaving mine. I need someone who doesn't belong. Someone who isn't trying to climb any ladder or make any connections. Someone who can stand next to me at these events and be real. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to accompany me. Not as an employee exactly, not as a date, definitely not, but as... She paused, choosing her words carefully. As a grounding presence, someone who reminds me that not everything is a transaction. I stared at her. You want to hire me to go to parties with you? I want to pay you to be yourself at events where everyone else is pretending. She named a figure that made my vision blur. Per event, plus expenses, plus a clothing allowance, because you'll need to look the part. The number hung in the air between us. It was more than I made in 2 months. It was Mia's shoes and the heating bill and the credit card debt and maybe, possibly, a small cushion for the first time in years. Why me? Because in a room full of people trying to impress me, you're the only one who acted like I might be human. That's rarer than you think. But I'm nobody. I don't know anything about your world. I'll screw up. I'll say the wrong thing. You already did, and somehow it was exactly right. She stood, smoothing her dress. Think about it. You don't have to answer now. Here's my card. Call me by Monday if you're interested. She held out a simple white business card. I took it, my fingers clumsy. One more thing, Elena said, pausing at the door. If you do this, there are rules. You don't talk to the press. You don't leverage this connection for personal gain. You don't gossip about what you see or hear, and you never, ever make me regret choosing you. And if I break those rules? Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Then you'll discover exactly how unpleasant I can be when someone wastes my time. She left without another word. I sat there for a long time, holding the card, my hands shaking slightly. The whole thing felt insane, dangerous, like the setup for a scam I wasn't smart enough to see coming, but that number kept echoing in my head. I made it home just after midnight. The apartment was dark except for the glow from the bathroom nightlight. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor who watched Mia when I worked nights, was asleep on the couch. I paid her what I could, which was never enough, and she never complained. I checked on Mia. She was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off, one arm hanging over the edge. Her current favorite stuffed animal, a ratty elephant named Peanut, was clutched against her chest. I tucked the blanket around her, careful not to wake her, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. She smelled like the cheap strawberry shampoo I bought in bulk at Costco. In my own room, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out Elena's card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just her name, a phone number, and an email address. Nothing else. I thought about the way she'd looked at me in that lounge. Not like I was staff. Not like I was invisible. Like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Whatever you said to her worked. She told the venue manager you were refreshingly genuine. I don't know what that means, but I'm not asking questions. You're back on the roster. I read it 3 times, then set the phone down. Refreshingly genuine, like being broke and desperate made me authentic. I should have been angry, but mostly I was just tired. Tired of calculating every dollar, every decision, every risk. Tired of working myself into the ground and still coming up short. Tired of watching Mia grow up in an apartment with water stains on the ceiling and neighbors who screamed at each other through the walls. The number on that card could change things. Really change things. But nothing in life came free, especially not from people like Elena Varelli. I lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere below me, Mr. Nakamura was playing his saxophone, the mournful notes bleeding through the floor. He always practiced after midnight, when the world was quiet enough to hear him. Sleep didn't come easy. When it finally did, I dreamed of ballrooms and champagne and a woman with dark eyes who looked at me like I might be worth something. Saturday morning, Mia and I went to the park. It was our routine. Every weekend I wasn't working, we'd hit Volunteer Park around 10 a.m. before the crowds arrived. Mia liked the swings best, pumping her legs furiously while I pushed, her laughter cutting through the cool spring air. Higher, Daddy. Any higher and you'll go into orbit. That's not scientifically possible, she informed me very seriously. She'd been on a space kick lately, checking out every book about planets the library had. The escape velocity of Earth is approximately 11.2 kilometers per second. Is that right? Miss Rodriguez told us. She knows everything. I caught the swing, slowing it down. Almost time to go, Bug. I've got a shift at 3. Her face fell. Again? Yeah, again. She dragged her feet in the wood chips, stopping the swing completely. When I grow up, I'm going to have a job where I never have to leave. What kind of job is that? An astronaut. Because in space, there's nowhere else to go. I crouched down in front of her, brushing hair out of her eyes. You're going to be the best astronaut in history. I know, she said, matter of fact. We walked home slowly, her small hand in mine. She chattered about her week, art class, a boy named Dylan who ate paste, the substitute teacher who didn't know you were supposed to line up by height. I made the appropriate sounds, laughed at the right moments, but part of my mind was elsewhere. On a white business card sitting on my nightstand. On a choice I hadn't made yet. That evening, I worked a shift at the warehouse. 4 hours of loading trucks, my back screaming, my hands numb inside cheap work gloves. The guy next to me, Travis, spent the whole time complaining about his ex-wife and child support payments. System's rigged, man, he said, hefting a box onto the dolly. They take half your paycheck and act like you're the bad guy for wanting to keep what you earned. I didn't respond. Travis took silence as agreement and kept going. My kid's mom, she don't even work. Just sits at home, spends my money on whatever, and I'm supposed to smile and say thank you? I thought about Mia's mom, Stephanie. She'd left when Mia was 14 months old, woken up one Tuesday, and decided motherhood wasn't for her. Signed away custody, signed away support obligations, signed away everything except a vague promise to stay in touch. She hadn't. 3 postcards in 5 years, all from different cities, none with return addresses. I'd been angry for a long time, then just tired. Now I mostly felt nothing when I thought about her, except a strange gratitude that she'd at least been honest about not wanting to stay. You got kids? Travis asked. 1 daughter. They with their mom? No, just me. Travis grunted. That's rough, man, but at least you don't got to deal with the courts. Yeah, I said, lifting another box. Lucky me. Sunday, I called Elena. I'd meant to wait until Monday like she'd said, but the weekend had dragged and I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the money. About what it could mean. About the possibility of giving Mia something better than water-stained ceilings and second-hand everything. She answered on the second ring. Elena Virelli. It's Caleb Hayes from Thursday night. I know. There was a smile in her voice. You're calling early. I've been thinking about your offer. And? I took a breath. I'll do it. Whatever this is, I'm in. Silence stretched between us, long enough that I wondered if I'd misread everything, if she'd already changed her mind. Good, she said finally. We'll start small. There's a gallery opening this Friday, 7 p.m. I'll send you the details and arrange for appropriate clothing. Do you own a decent watch? No. I'll take care of it. One more thing, Caleb. Yeah? This arrangement works because you're not trying to be someone else. The moment you start performing, pretending, trying to fit in, that's when it falls apart. Understand? I think so. Then I'll see you Friday. She hung up. I sat on my couch, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air and wondering what the hell I'd just agreed to. Mrs. Chen knocked on the door around 2, bringing Mia back from a playdate with her granddaughter. Mia burst in like a small tornado, already talking before she'd cleared the threshold. Sophie has a turtle, a real one. His name is Captain Pickles, and he eats lettuce and swims in a special tank, and Mrs. Chen says maybe we could get a turtle too if we had space, but we don't have space, do we, Daddy? Probably not, Bug. Her face fell, but only for a second. That's okay? Captain Pickles can be my friend when I visit. After Mrs. Chen left, Mia and I made dinner. Box mac and cheese with frozen peas stirred in, her favorite. We ate on the couch, watching nature documentaries, her feet tucked under her, narrating facts she'd already memorized. Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? I did not know that. And they're really smart. They can open jars and escape from tanks and recognize people's faces. Smarter than me, probably. She giggled. Not smarter than me, though. No, I agreed, pulling her close. Definitely not smarter than you. Later, after she'd fallen asleep, I opened my laptop and Googled Elena Varelli. Pages and pages of results. Articles about her company, Varelli Consulting. Features in business magazines. A TED Talk about disrupting traditional corporate hierarchies. Interviews where she came across as sharp, confident, and completely in control. There were personal details too, buried deeper. She'd grown up in Chicago, South Side, daughter of a factory worker and a nurse. Put herself through community college, then state school, graduated with honors and a mountain of debt. Worked 80-hour weeks at a firm that underpaid her, saved every penny, and launched her own company at 23. 8 years later, she was a millionaire several times over. The photos showed someone who'd learned to wear wealth comfortably. Designer clothes, expensive haircuts, the kind of polish that looked effortless but required constant maintenance. But in the earlier pictures, the ones from 7 or 8 years ago, I could see something different. A hungry look. A determination that bordered on desperation. I recognized that look. Saw it in my own mirror some mornings. One article, from about 3 years back, mentioned a broken engagement to some tech executive. The piece was mostly professional. Launch announcements, merger talks, but there was one quote that stuck with me. "I don't do anything halfway," Elena had said. "That includes knowing when to walk away." I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. This was a bad idea. A rich woman hiring a broke single dad to stand next to her at fancy parties, for reasons that didn't fully add up. It had red flags written all over it. But red flags didn't pay for Mia's shoes. Red flags didn't fix the transmission on my truck, or replace the broken window in the bedroom, or cover the security deposit on a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. I thought about my dad, who'd worked construction until his back gave out, who'd spent my entire childhood warning me that people with money would use you up and throw you away. He'd been bitter about it, but he'd also been right about a lot of things. "Don't trust anyone who says they want to help you," he used to say. "They want something, always." So what did Elena want? I didn't have an answer, but I knew what I wanted. A chance. Just one real chance to get ahead instead of constantly falling behind. Maybe that made me desperate. Maybe desperate was the only thing I had left to work with. Friday arrived faster than I expected. A package showed up Wednesday. 2 suits, tailored to measurements I didn't remember giving, along with shirts, ties, shoes, and a watch that probably cost more than my truck. Everything fit perfectly. I didn't want to think about how she'd known my sizes. The gallery was in a converted warehouse in Pioneer Square, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. I arrived 15 minutes early, feeling like a fraud in clothes that cost more than my rent. The doorman barely glanced at me before stepping aside. Inside, maybe 70 people mingled among abstract paintings that looked like expensive accidents. Waiters circulated with champagne and small plates of food I couldn't identify. Everyone looked comfortable, like they'd been born knowing how to hold a wine glass and make small talk about art they didn't understand. I spotted Elena near the back, talking to a thin man with wireframe glasses. She wore deep green, her hair down this time, and when she saw me, something in her expression shifted. Softened, maybe, or relaxed. She excused herself and crossed to me. "You came. You paid for the clothes. Seemed rude not to." She smiled, a real one this time, not the polite mask from the hotel. "How do you feel?" "Like everyone can tell I don't belong here." Perfect. That's exactly the energy I need. Before I could ask what that meant, she linked her arm through mine and led me into the crowd. The next 2 hours were surreal. Elena introduced me to people whose names I immediately forgot, steered conversations with surgical precision, and somehow made me part of every interaction without requiring me to do much more than stand there and occasionally nod. When someone asked what I did, she answered before I could. "Caleb works in logistics," she said smoothly. "Keeps things running behind the scenes." It wasn't technically a lie. Loading trucks was logistics, in a way. Around 9, we ended up in a quieter corner away from the main crowd. Elena accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, but didn't drink it. "You're good at this," I said. "At what?" "Managing people. Making them think they're important while you extract exactly what you need." She looked at me sharply, then laughed, surprised and genuine. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "Isn't it?" "Yes, but most people don't notice." She studied the champagne glass, watching bubbles rise. "You're more observant than I expected." "I watch people. It's kind of all I've got. What do you see when you watch me? The question caught me off guard. I started to deflect, to say something safe, but she was looking at me with that same intensity from the hotel lounge, like my answer actually mattered. I see someone who's really good at being what people expect, I said slowly. But I don't know if you like it. Silence settled between us. Someone laughed too loud across the room. No, Elena said quietly. I don't. She didn't explain, didn't elaborate, just set down the untouched champagne and straightened her shoulders. Let's go. I've made the necessary appearances. Outside, the night air was cool and damp, threatening rain. Elena's driver pulled up in a black sedan. She paused before getting in. You did well tonight. I barely said anything. Exactly. She smiled slightly. Same time next week. There's a charity dinner. I'll send details. Okay. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. Good night, Caleb. Good night. I watched the sedan pull away, then walked to where I'd parked my truck 6 blocks over to avoid the valet situation. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. A deposit had cleared. The amount made my chest tight. She'd paid me. For standing next to her and watching people. I sat in the truck for a while, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Trying to convince myself this was real and sustainable and not about to explode in my face. The rain started as I pulled onto the highway. Gentle at first, then harder, until the wipers could barely keep up. I drove home through the downpour, past the bright signs of businesses I couldn't afford, through neighborhoods that got progressively shabbier, until I reached my building with its broken security door and flickering hallway lights. Mrs. Chen met me at the door, Mia asleep in her arms. She fought bedtime, Mrs. Chen whispered. Wanted to wait up for you. I'm sorry I was late. It's okay. She's a good girl. I carried Mia to her room, tucked her in without waking her. Sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe, her face peaceful in sleep. Tomorrow she'd ask about my night, and I'd tell her some edited version of the truth. That I'd gone to an art show, that I'd met interesting people, that Daddy's new job was going okay. I wouldn't tell her about the deposit in my bank account, or the strange arrangement with a woman I barely knew, or the feeling that I'd stepped into a current I didn't fully understand. Not yet. For now, I just let her believe her dad was doing fine. Because maybe, for the first time in a long while, that was starting to be true. The second event came 6 days later. Caleb spent those 6 days trying to convince himself this was temporary. A lucky break that would last a few months before Elena got bored or found someone better suited to whatever strange game she was playing. He didn't let himself think past the next payment, the next deposit that would chip away at the mountain of debt he'd been climbing for years. Mia noticed the new clothes hanging in his closet. Why do you have fancy stuff now? She asked Tuesday morning, poking at the suit sleeve like it might bite her. New job requires it. What kind of job? He'd rehearsed this answer. I help someone at business events, make sure things run smoothly. Like an assistant? Something like that. She seemed satisfied with that, which was good because Caleb didn't have a better explanation. He barely understood it himself. The charity dinner was downtown at the Columbia Tower Club, 45th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Elena had sent him the details Wednesday. Location, time, dress code, and a single line at the bottom of the email that said, "Just be yourself," which felt simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. Caleb arrived early again. Couldn't help it. Years of hourly work had trained punctuality into his bones. You showed up early or you didn't eat. The elevator ride up made his ears pop. Through the glass walls, he watched Seattle shrink below him, the streets turning into neat grids, the people disappearing entirely. The club was older money than the gallery had been, quieter. The kind of place where wealth didn't announce itself because it didn't need to. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, oil paintings of ships and mountains. About 50 people stood in clusters, their voices low and controlled. Helena stood near the bar, talking to a woman with silver hair and perfect posture. She wore navy blue tonight, simple and expensive, with diamond earrings that caught the light when she moved. When she saw Caleb, she excused herself and crossed to him. "You're early." "Bad habit." "I don't think it is." She adjusted his tie slightly, a gesture that felt practiced. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm going to say something wrong and embarrass you." "You won't." You seem really sure about that. Because you don't try to impress people. That's the whole point. She took his arm, the same easy motion from the gallery. Come on, there are some people you should meet. The next hour blurred. Elena introduced him to executives, entrepreneurs, philanthropists whose names he recognized from news articles. She wove him into conversations with the same surgical precision as before, always positioning him just close enough to seem involved without requiring much input. Most people barely registered him. A few asked polite questions. Where are you from? What do you do? And seemed to lose interest when his answers didn't include stock portfolios or startup valuations. Caleb didn't take it personally. He'd stopped expecting interest from people like this a long time ago. But then there was Marcus Trent. Caleb noticed him watching from across the room. Late 40s, expensive suit that somehow looked cheap on him, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He made his way over during a lull in conversation, champagne glass held like a weapon. Elena, he said, his voice too loud for the space. Always a pleasure. Marcus. Elena's tone was perfectly polite and completely cold. I don't think I've met your companion. Marcus extended his hand to Caleb. Marcus Trent. I run a private equity firm downtown. Caleb Hayes. The handshake was aggressive, all squeeze and no warmth. Hayes, Marcus repeated like he was testing the name. What's your background, Caleb? Logistics, Elena said before Caleb could answer. How fascinating. Which firm? He's independent, Elena said smoothly. Consulting work, mostly. Marcus's smile sharpened. Independent. How enterprising. He turned his attention fully to Caleb, and there was something predatory in his expression. You know, Elena has excellent taste in business associates. I'm always curious about new talent in the consulting space. I appreciate that, Caleb said carefully. What's your specialty? Operations? Strategy? Process optimization? The questions came fast, designed to expose. Caleb felt the trap closing, but couldn't see a way out that didn't involve lying outright or admitting he had no idea what Marcus was talking about. Elena stepped in. Marcus, I hate to interrupt your interrogation, but Caleb and I need to speak with the development director before dinner starts. Of course, of course. Marcus raised his glass in mock salute. We should grab lunch sometime, Caleb. Compare notes on the consulting landscape. Sure, Caleb said, knowing it would never happen. Elena guided him away, her hand tight on his arm. She didn't speak until they reached the far side of the room, near the windows where the city lights sprawled out below them. That was Marcus being subtle, she said quietly. Which means he's suspicious. Of what? Of you. Of why you're here. She glanced back toward where Marcus was now talking to another group, his laughter carrying across the room. Marcus and I have history. Bad history. He thinks everyone operates the way he does. People are assets or obstacles, nothing in between. What kind of bad history? Elena hesitated, her jaw tight. He tried to poach half my staff 3 years ago, offered them double their salaries and promised them equity in ventures that didn't exist. When that failed, he started spreading rumors about my company's financial stability. Cost me 2 major contracts and about 6 months of cleanup. Why is he here tonight? Because his company donated $250,000 to the Children's Hospital. Money buys access, even when everyone knows where it came from. She turned away from the window, her expression settling back into professional neutrality. He's going to dig into your background. I need you to be prepared for that. What am I supposed to say? The truth, as much as you're comfortable with. Don't lie. He'll catch it. But you don't owe him your life story either. Dinner was called before Caleb could respond. They were seated at a table with 6 others, a tech CEO and his wife, a city councilwoman, and a married couple who owned a chain of boutique hotels. The conversation flowed around topics Caleb could barely follow: zoning regulations, venture capital trends, the challenges of scaling sustainably. He stayed quiet, eating food he couldn't identify, and watching Elena work the table. She was incredible at it, asking the right questions, laughing at mediocre jokes, making everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. But every so often, her eyes would flick to him, checking in, making sure he was still afloat. The hotel owner's wife, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes and graying hair, eventually turned to him. You've been very quiet, Caleb. Are you enjoying yourself? It's interesting, he said honestly. Different from what I'm used to. What are you used to? He thought about lying, defaulting to the consulting story, but Elena's words echoed in his head. The truth, as much as you're comfortable with. I'm a single dad, he said. Most of my time is spent making sure my daughter eats vegetables and finishes her homework. This is about as far from that reality as I can imagine. Patricia's expression softened. How old is your daughter? 6. That's a wonderful age. Mine are grown now, but I remember 6. All curiosity and questions and impossible energy. That's pretty accurate. What does she want to be when she grows up? An astronaut. She's very specific about it. Patricia laughed. Good for her. My youngest wanted to be a dinosaur at that age. We had to explain that wasn't technically a career path. The conversation shifted after that, became easier. Patricia asked about Mia's interests, shared stories about her own kids, and somehow made Caleb feel less like an imposter and more like someone who'd simply wandered into an unusual situation. When dinner ended and people started filtering toward the bar or gathering in small groups, Patricia touched his arm gently. You're good for her, you know. Caleb blinked. Sorry? She nodded toward Elena, who was talking to the councilwoman near the windows. Elena, I've known her for about 5 years since she started making waves in the business community. She's brilliant and driven and absolutely terrifying when she needs to be, but she's also lonely, even if she'd never admit it. We're not. I know what you're not, Patricia said gently. I'm just saying she seems more relaxed with you around. That's worth something. Before Caleb could figure out how to respond to that, Patricia excused herself to find her husband. Elena reappeared a few minutes later, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Ready to leave? If you are. They said their goodbyes, abbreviated versions, nothing elaborate, and headed for the elevator. The ride down was silent. Elena leaned against the brass railing, eyes closed, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable. Long night? Caleb asked. They're all long nights. She opened her eyes, studying the floor numbers as they descended. Did Marcus approach you again? No, but Patricia, the hotel owner's wife, she was nice. Patricia's one of the good ones. She built that business from a single bed and breakfast in Spokane. Worked every job herself before she started hiring. The elevator opened onto the lobby. Elena's driver was waiting outside, the black sedan idling at the curb. But Elena didn't move toward it immediately. Instead, she turned to Caleb. How honest can I be with you? The question caught him off guard. I don't know. How honest do you want to be? Tonight was a test. Marcus is going to dig, like I said. He's going to find out you're not a consultant, that you don't have an MBA from wherever, that you worked hourly jobs to make rent. She held his gaze. When that happens, he's going to use it to embarrass me, publicly, if he can. So why not fire me now? Get ahead of it. Because that's what he expects. And because I don't particularly care what Marcus Trent thinks of my choices. She paused. But I need to know if you can handle the scrutiny. If someone confronts you, questions your background, implies you don't belong, can you handle that without falling apart? Caleb thought about every job interview where he'd been rejected for not having a degree, every parent-teacher conference where the other fathers were doctors and lawyers, and he was the guy who showed up in work boots because he'd come straight from a shift. Every time someone had looked at him like he was worth less because he earned less. Yeah, he said quietly. I can handle it. Elena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, good. She started toward the car, then stopped and turned back. Caleb? Yeah. Thank you for tonight. I didn't do anything. You were here. That's more than you think. She got in the car and it pulled away, leaving Caleb standing on the sidewalk in a suit that cost more than his security deposit, wondering what exactly he'd signed up for. The next morning, Mia woke him up by jumping on his bed. Daddy, you're late. It's already 8:30. He groaned, grabbing his phone from the nightstand. Saturday. No shifts scheduled. He'd actually been able to sleep in for once, and his 6-year-old was treating it like a crisis. Bug, it's the weekend. I know, but Mrs. Chen said we could help her plant flowers if we came early, and you promised we could go to the library, and Sophie invited me over after lunch and… Okay. He sat up, scrubbing a hand over his face. Give me 10 minutes. She bounced off the bed and raced to the kitchen, her footsteps thundering across the cheap linoleum. Caleb followed more slowly, his body stiff from too many consecutive days of physical work. The warehouse shifts had tapered off now that he had Elena's money coming in, but he hadn't quit entirely. Couldn't quite make himself rely on something that felt so unstable. Mia was already eating cereal at the table, milk dripping down her chin. "You're messy," he said. "You're slow." Fair point. They spent the morning helping Mrs. Chen plant marigolds in the narrow strip of dirt behind the building. Mia took the job very seriously, digging holes with intense concentration and patting the soil around each plant like she was tucking them into bed. Mrs. Chen gave her lemonade and cookies afterward, and Mia talked non-stop about Captain Pickles the turtle and how maybe they could get fish instead because fish didn't need as much space. "We'll see," Caleb said, which was parent code for probably not, but I don't want to argue right now. The library trip took most of the afternoon. Mia checked out 6 books, 4 about space, 1 about octopuses, and 1 picture book about a mouse who wanted to be an astronaut. She read him the mouse book on the bus ride home, doing different voices for each character. "That was really good," he said when she finished. "I know. Ms. Rodriguez says I'm a good reader." Ms. Rodriguez is right. That evening, after dropping Mia at Sophie's for a playdate, Caleb sat in his truck outside the apartment building and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. No voicemail. He was about to dismiss it when the phone rang again. Same number. "Hello? Caleb Hayes?" Male voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is James Vickery. I'm a reporter with the Seattle Tribune. I'm working on a story about Elena Varelli, and I was hoping I could ask you a few questions." Caleb's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "Public records. You're listed as an independent contractor for her company. I'm just trying to verify some basic information. How long you've been working together, what your role entails, that sort of thing." "No comment." "Mr. Hayes, I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm just doing my job. If you could spare a few minutes—" I said no comment. Caleb hung up. His hands were shaking. This was Marcus. Had to be. Less than 24 hours and the vultures were already circling. He called Elena. She answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "How did you, you never call me. Something's wrong. A reporter just contacted me, James Vickery, Seattle Tribune, asking about our working relationship." Silence on the other end, then a long exhale. "Did you say anything?" "No," hung up on him. "Good. Don't answer if he calls back. Don't engage with any media, period. I'll handle this." "Elena, I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. It's Marcus being predictable." Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "I'll make some calls. This goes away before it becomes a problem. And if it doesn't?" Another pause. "Then we deal with it. Together." She hung up. Caleb sat in the truck, engine off, watching the sun drop behind the buildings across the street. The thing about climbing was that you could always fall. He'd known that. Had told himself he was prepared for it. But knowing it and experiencing it were different things entirely. Monday morning, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Lunch? 12:30. I'm sending a car." The car showed up at noon, a different sedan than her usual one, with a driver who didn't speak beyond confirming Caleb's name. They drove to a restaurant in Madison Park, the kind of place with white tablecloths and prices that weren't listed on the menu. Elena was already seated at a corner table, away from the windows. She'd pulled her hair back and wore minimal makeup, like she'd come straight from a gym or hadn't slept. When Caleb sat down, she slid a folder across the table. "The Tribune killed the story." "How?" "I called the editor-in-chief. Reminded him his paper had covered our hospital donation last year very favorably, and it would be unfortunate if future philanthropic efforts went unrecognized due to sloppy reporting from overeager staff." Caleb stared at her. "You threatened them." "I made a business observation." "That's the same thing." "Yes." She opened her menu without looking at it. "But it worked. Vickery's been reassigned to city council coverage." "What about Marcus?" "Marcus is persistent but not stupid. He knows I know it was him. That limits his next moves." She finally looked up, her dark eyes tired. "But this is going to keep happening, Caleb. People are going to ask questions. They're going to want to know who you are and why you're with me." "What do you want me to say?" "Whatever you're comfortable with. But understand that silence is also an answer, one that makes people more curious, not less. The waiter appeared, took their orders. Elena ordered for both of them without asking, and Caleb didn't object. When the waiter left, she leaned forward slightly. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Are you having second thoughts about this arrangement? Caleb considered lying, giving her the easy answer, but her earlier words echoed back. The truth as much as you're comfortable with. Sometimes, he admitted. When things like this happen, yeah. I think about how much simpler my life was when I was invisible. But invisible didn't pay Mia's dentist bills. Invisible didn't mean I could take a weekend off without calculating whether we'd make rent. So yeah, I have second thoughts, but I also have reasons to stay. Elena nodded slowly. That's fair. Their food arrived, something with salmon and asparagus that tasted expensive. They ate in silence for a while, the restaurant's ambient noise filling the space between them. Can I ask you something? Caleb said eventually. Go ahead. Why do you actually do this? The events? The networking? All of it. You've already made it. You don't need more money or more success. So what's the point? Elena set down her fork, her expression unreadable. That's a complicated question. I've got time. She smiled slightly. When I started my company, I was hungry. Not metaphorically, actually hungry sometimes, because I was putting every dollar back into the business. I worked out of a studio apartment with furniture from Goodwill and ate ramen for dinner more often than I'd like to admit. Sounds familiar. I told myself that once I made it, once I had enough money to be comfortable, I'd stop. I'd step back, enjoy what I'd built. She picked up her water glass, turned it slowly in her hands. But it doesn't work that way. Success creates its own obligations. People expect things from you. Your company grows and suddenly you're responsible for 40 employees and their families. You get invited to serve on boards, speak at conferences, donate to causes. And if you stop, even for a moment, someone else fills that space. So you're trapped. I'm committed. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him sharply, then her expression softened. I don't know anymore. The honesty in those 5 words hit harder than Caleb expected. Here was this woman who commanded rooms full of powerful people, who'd built an empire through sheer will, admitting she'd lost sight of why she was doing any of it. For what it's worth, Caleb said, you don't seem happy. Happiness is a luxury. That's bullshit. Elena's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? It's bullshit, he repeated, more gently this time. Happiness isn't something you earn after checking enough boxes. It's not a reward for success. It's just moments. Small ones, usually. My daughter laughing at a dumb joke. Mrs. Chen's lemonade on a hot day. The way the city looks right before sunrise when I'm driving home from a night shift. That's very philosophical for someone who loads trucks for a living. Loaded. Past tense. Mostly. He met her eyes. And yeah, maybe it is. But you asked why I stay despite the second thoughts. Those moments are why. Because this money, this whole weird arrangement, it gives me more of them. More time with Mia, less stress about bills that's worth navigating whatever Marcus Trent throws at me. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. Your daughter is very lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. No, Elena said. Trust me, you are not. They finished lunch without much more conversation. Elena insisted on paying. This is a business meal. And they walked out to where both cars were waiting. Before getting into her sedan, she turned back to him. There's an event this Friday. Tech Industry Gala at the Convention Center. Bigger crowd than usual, more media presence. She paused. After what happened with the Tribune, I'll understand if you'd rather sit this one out. Caleb thought about it. About the reporter's phone call and Marcus Trent's predatory smile and the feeling of being examined under a microscope. Then he thought about Mia's new shoes, the ones he'd bought without checking his account balance first. About the small cushion growing in his savings. About the possibility of moving somewhere better, somewhere with heat that worked and neighbors who didn't scream through walls. What time should I be there? Elena smiled, genuine relief crossing her features. 7. I'll send the details. Okay. She hesitated like she wanted to say more, then seemed to think better of it. See you Friday, Caleb. See you Friday. He watched her car pull away, then got into his own ride back to the apartment. The driver took a different route this time, cutting through downtown, past the buildings where people like Elena worked. Caleb looked up at the glass towers and wondered what it felt like to own that kind of space, to command that kind of power. Then he thought about going home to Mia, who didn't care about power or money or status, who just wanted him to read her the Mouse Astronaut book again and help her build a blanket fort in the living room. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe happiness was a luxury, but if that was true, Caleb was richer than he'd thought. Wednesday evening, Mia's teacher called. Mr. Hayes, I wanted to touch base about Mia's homework situation. Caleb's stomach tightened. Is there a problem? Not exactly, but she's been turning in assignments late recently. Nothing dramatic, just a day or two behind. I wanted to check if everything's okay at home. Yeah, everything's fine. I've been working some evening shifts. I might not be checking her backpack as consistently as I should. That's understandable. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything else going on. Ms. Rodriguez's voice was kind but firm. Mia is a bright kid. I'd hate to see her fall behind because of something we could easily address. I'll stay on top of it. Thank you for letting me know. After he hung up, Caleb sat at the kitchen table and pulled out Mia's backpack. Sure enough, there were 3 worksheets she hadn't finished, plus a reading log that was 2 weeks behind. He heard her in her room, singing off-key to herself while she played. The guilt settled heavy in his chest. He'd been so focused on the money, on securing their future, that he'd let the present slip. Mia, he called. Come here, please. She appeared in the doorway, Peanut the elephant tucked under one arm. Am I in trouble? No, but we need to talk about homework. Her face fell. I forgot. That's the problem. We can't forget. School matters. But you're always working now. The words hit like a punch. I know, and I'm sorry about that, but that doesn't mean you stop doing your work. We're going to set up a new system, okay? Every day when you get home, first thing we do is check your backpack together. No TV, no playing until homework's done. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's necessary. She crossed her arms, her expression mutinous. For a second, she looked exactly like her mother. Same stubborn set to her jaw, same refusal to back down. Then her face crumpled. I miss you, she said quietly. You're always gone now. Caleb pulled her into a hug, and she buried her face against his shoulder. I know, Bug. I'm trying to make things better for us. Things were already good. Were they? When we couldn't afford to fix the heater last winter? When you needed new shoes and I had to wait until payday? I don't care about shoes. You will when yours have holes in them. She pulled back, looking up at him with eyes too serious for 6 years old. Promise you're not going away like Mom did. The question gutted him. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. You promise? I promise. She seemed satisfied with that. They spent the next hour working through her overdue assignments, Mia's pencil scratching across the paper while Caleb made dinner. By the time they finished, it was past her bedtime, but he let her stay up an extra half hour to read together. After she fell asleep, he sat in the living room with his laptop and stared at the email from Elena about Friday's event. Black tie. 500 guests. Major donors from every tech company in the region. The biggest stage yet. And Caleb still wasn't entirely sure what role he was supposed to be playing. Friday arrived with rain that wouldn't quit. Caleb stood in front of his bathroom mirror, struggling with the bow tie that had come with the tuxedo. His fingers kept fumbling the fabric, creating lopsided knots that looked worse each time he tried to fix them. Behind him, Mia sat on the toilet lid, swinging her legs and watching with the critical eye of someone who definitely knew he was failing. You're doing it wrong, she announced. Thanks for the observation. Mrs. Chen could probably help. She knows how to tie everything. Mrs. Chen is 73 years old. I'm not asking her to come fix my tie. Why not? You ask her to watch me all the time. Caleb gave up on the tie and turned around. That's different. How? Because watching you is important. This is just a piece of fabric. Mia tilted her head, considering. If it's just fabric, why are you so worried about it? 6 years old and she already argued like a lawyer. He had no idea where she got that from. Stephanie had been many things, but analytical wasn't one of them. Because sometimes things that don't matter still matter, he said, which made no sense even as the words left his mouth. Mia giggled. That's silly. Yeah, well, you're silly. He ended up watching a YouTube tutorial on his phone while Mia provided commentary. It took 4 more attempts before he got something that resembled the video. Close enough, anyway. The tux fit better than the suits had. Elena's assistant had apparently been taking notes about his measurements because everything was perfect. Tailored, expensive, the kind of clothing that made him look like someone he wasn't, or maybe someone he was becoming. He couldn't tell anymore. Mrs. Chen arrived at 6 to watch Mia. She took one look at Caleb and clapped her hands together. So handsome, like movie star. I look ridiculous. No, very handsome. Your daughter, she should see. Mia was already there, staring at him with wide eyes. Daddy, you look fancy. Too fancy? No, good fancy. She paused. Are you going to see the pretty lady again? Miss Varelli, yeah. Is she your girlfriend? No, Bug, she's my boss. Bosses don't make you dress fancy. This one does. Mia seemed skeptical but didn't push it. She hugged him tight before he left, making him promise to tell her about the food, because apparently that was the most interesting part of these events to a 6-year-old. The car came at 6:30. Different driver again. A woman this time, professional and quiet. The rain had eased to a drizzle, turning the city streets into mirrors of reflected light. Traffic was heavy downtown, everyone heading somewhere for the weekend. Caleb watched people through the tinted windows, couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing, a man selling umbrellas on a corner even though the rain had mostly stopped. Normal people, living normal lives. The convention center was lit up like something from a movie, red carpet stretching from the street to the entrance, cameras flashing despite the weather. Caleb's stomach tightened. Elena had mentioned media presence, but this was different. This was spectacle. The car pulled up to a side entrance instead of the main one. The driver turned around. Ms. Virelli requested you meet her inside. Through this door, take the hallway to the left, third door on the right. She's waiting there. Thank you. Inside, the hallway was quieter than he'd expected. Staff rushed past, carrying clipboards and headsets, too busy to notice him. He found the third door and knocked. Come in. Elena stood in what looked like a small dressing room, her back to a full-length mirror. She wore black again, but this dress was different from the others, more dramatic, with a neckline that plunged and fabric that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was up, her makeup more pronounced than usual. She looked like someone from a magazine spread, untouchable and perfect. Then she turned and he saw her hands were shaking. Hey, he said. You okay? Fine. The word came out too fast. Just organizing my thoughts. You're nervous. I'm never nervous. Your hands are shaking. She looked down at them like they'd betrayed her, then clasped them together. This event is important. There are people here tonight who can make or break deals worth millions. I need to be sharp. You're always sharp. Tonight, I need to be perfect. She met his eyes in the mirror. And I need you to be ready for what's coming. What's coming? Scrutiny, questions. Marcus Trent is going to be here, and he's not going to be subtle anymore. He's going to push, try to expose you, make you look foolish. She turned to face him directly. Can you handle that? Caleb thought about every time someone had looked down on him for not having a degree, for working with his hands, for being young and broke with a kid to raise. The anger that came with those moments had long since burned down to something quieter, but no less solid. I've been looked down on my entire life, he said. One more rich asshole isn't going to break me. Something in Elena's expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or respect. Good. Because tonight he's going to try. They walked to the main ballroom together. The space was enormous, bigger than any venue Caleb had seen yet. Round tables filled the floor, each one decorated with elaborate centerpieces that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A stage dominated the far wall, screens on either side showing a rotating loop of sponsor logos. At least 500 people filled the room, their voices creating a low roar of conversation and laughter. Elena's hand found his arm, the gesture familiar now. Stay close. Don't let anyone separate us. Why would they? Because that's how it works. They isolate, then attack. She guided him through the crowd with practiced efficiency. People called out greetings, tried to catch her attention, but she kept moving, acknowledging them with small nods or brief words without stopping. They made it to their table near the front. 8 seats, 5 already occupied. Caleb recognized Patricia, the hotel owner's wife from the charity dinner. She smiled warmly when she saw him. Caleb, Wonderful to see you again. You too. The others at the table introduced themselves, names and titles that immediately slipped from Caleb's memory. A pharmaceutical executive, a woman who ran a venture capital firm, a married couple involved in commercial real estate. They were polite enough, shaking his hand, but their eyes slid past him quickly, dismissing him as unimportant. Elena sat between Caleb and the pharmaceutical executive, and immediately the conversation shifted to business. Clinical trials, FDA approvals, market projections. Caleb stopped trying to follow after the first 5 minutes. Dinner was served in courses, each one more elaborate than the last. Caleb ate because food was food, but he couldn't identify half of what was on his plate. Some kind of fish with foam. Vegetables he'd never seen before. A dessert that looked like art and tasted like air. Patricia leaned over during the third course. Not what you're used to, I imagine. Is it that obvious? Only to someone paying attention. She smiled. Don't worry. Half the people here are pretending to know what they're eating, too. That's oddly comforting. That's the secret of events like this. Everyone's performing. The only difference is some people are better actors than others. After dinner, speeches started. The CEO of the hosting company thanked everyone for coming, talked about innovation and disruption and the future of technology. Other speakers followed, a mayor, a state representative, someone from a foundation Caleb had never heard of. The words blurred together, important sounding, but ultimately empty. Then Elena's name was called. She stood smoothly, squeezed Caleb's hand once under the table where no one could see, and walked to the stage. The room quieted. When she reached the microphone, she paused, looking out over the crowd with that same controlled intensity he'd seen in every interaction. Thank you for having me tonight, she began. Her voice carried easily, confident, and clear. I'm going to keep this brief because I know you're all eager to get to the bar. Polite laughter rippled through the room. 8 years ago, I started Virelli Consulting in a studio apartment with furniture from Goodwill and a business plan written on the back of takeout napkins. I had no connections, no family money, and no safety net. What I did have was a belief that the way we approach business strategy was fundamentally broken. She talked about building her company, about the failures and the small victories, about learning to trust her instincts even when everyone told her she was wrong. Caleb had heard parts of this story before, but hearing her tell it to a room full of powerful people was different. There was vulnerability in it, carefully measured but real. The thing about building something from nothing, Elena said, is that you never forget what nothing feels like. You never forget the fear of failure, the weight of uncertainty, the nights when you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. But you also never forget why you started. For me, it was simple. I wanted to prove that you don't need permission to succeed. You just need courage, clarity, and the willingness to bet on yourself. The room erupted in applause when she finished. Elena returned to the table, her expression neutral, but her shoulders slightly relaxed. That was good, Caleb said quietly. It was adequate. It was better than adequate, and you know it. She almost smiled. Almost. The speeches ended and the crowd dispersed, some heading to the bar, others clustering in groups to continue conversations. Elena was immediately surrounded by people wanting to congratulate her, ask questions, pitch ideas. Caleb stayed close, as instructed, watching the dance of networking and influence play out in real time. That's when Marcus Trent appeared. He emerged from the crowd like a shark cutting through water, his smile wide and predatory. Tonight he wore a tuxedo that was just slightly too shiny, too expensive in a way that broadcast rather than whispered. Elena, magnificent speech, truly inspiring. Marcus, Elena's voice could have frozen water. I don't believe I've had the pleasure of a proper introduction to your companion. He turned to Caleb, extending his hand. Marcus Trent. I don't think we've been formally introduced beyond our brief chat at the hospital event. Caleb shook his hand, keeping his grip firm but not aggressive. Caleb Hayes. Of course, the logistics consultant. Marcus's smile sharpened. You know, I've been asking around about you. Funny thing, nobody seems to know which firm you work for. I'm independent. So I've heard. What's your specialty exactly? Supply chain, distribution networks? Elena stepped in. Marcus, this isn't the time. I'm just curious. You understand curiosity, Elena. You built a career on it. He kept his attention fixed on Caleb. It's fascinating, really. Here you are at one of the biggest events of the year, accompanying one of the most successful consultants in the region, and yet nobody's heard of you. It's almost like you appeared out of nowhere. Maybe I'm just not very memorable, Caleb said evenly. Oh, I doubt that. In fact, I'd say you're extremely memorable. Single father, 3 part-time jobs, living in an apartment in North Seattle that rents for about $1,200 a month. Am I close? The words landed like punches. Around them, conversations had started to quiet, people sensing drama. Elena's voice was ice. That's enough. I'm just stating facts. Public information, really. Nothing secret about where someone lives or how they make a living. Marcus turned back to Caleb. The question is, what's a man in your position doing at an event like this? What exactly is your arrangement with Miss Varelli? Caleb felt the room's attention shift fully to him. Cameras from the media section at the back were turning their way. This was the trap Elena had warned about, sprung in the most public way possible. He could deflect, make an excuse, let Elena handle it, or he could do what she'd hired him for in the first place. Be honest. You're right, Caleb said, his voice steady. I'm not a consultant. I don't have an MBA or a corner office or connections in this world. I load trucks, I work warehouse shifts, I do whatever it takes to support my daughter. Marcus's smile widened. So you admit? I admit that Ms. Varelli saw something in me that maybe you can't see, that she values perspective over pedigree, that she's smart enough to know credentials don't make someone worth listening to. Caleb held Marcus's gaze. And yeah, I'm out of my depth here, but at least I'm honest about it. How many people in this room can say the same? The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's smile had frozen, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He'd expected Caleb to crumble, to get defensive or embarrassed. Instead, Caleb had flipped the script, made honesty a weapon instead of a weakness. Elena's hand found Caleb's elbow, her touch light but grounding. If you'll excuse us, Marcus, we have other people to speak with. She guided Caleb away before Marcus could respond. They didn't stop until they reached the far side of the room, near the windows overlooking the city. That was either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave, Elena said quietly. I haven't decided which. Probably both. He's going to use that, twist it, weaponize it, turn it into something ugly. Let him. I told the truth. That's all I've got. Elena studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not the polite professional laugh she used in crowds, but something genuine and unguarded. What? Caleb asked. You just did in 30 seconds what I've been trying to do for 8 years. What's that? Made Marcus Trent look small without saying a word against him. Before Caleb could respond, Patricia appeared beside them, her expression delighted. That was magnificent, she said. The look on Marcus's face, I wish I'd taken a picture. He's not going to let this go, Elena said. Of course not. Men like Marcus never do. But you made your point, and you made it publicly. Patricia turned to Caleb. You have more courage than most people in this room, myself included. I don't know about that. I do. Trust me on this one. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People approached Caleb now, curious rather than dismissive. Some asked genuine questions about his work, his life, his daughter. Others were clearly just fishing for gossip, trying to understand the dynamic between him and Elena. He answered honestly when he could, and deflected when he couldn't, following Elena's lead through the social minefield. By 10:30, the crowd had started to thin. Elena made their excuses, thanking the hosts, and they headed for the exit. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets slick and glistening under streetlights. The car was waiting. They got in, and the driver pulled away from the curb smoothly. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Elena stared out the window, her expression distant. Are you angry? Caleb finally asked. No. You seem angry. I'm thinking. About? She turned to look at him. About the fact that you just did something I would never have had the courage to do. You stood in front of 500 people and admitted vulnerability. Do you understand how rare that is in this world? It didn't feel brave, it felt necessary. That's what makes it brave. The car navigated through downtown traffic, past bars and restaurants still full of Friday night crowds. Elena's phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages, probably, reactions to what had happened. She ignored them all. Marcus is going to escalate, she said. Tonight was just the opening move. What's the next move? I don't know, but it won't be subtle. She turned back to the window. I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I'm not. She looked at him sharply. Why not? Because for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Maybe not in the grand scheme of things, but to you, and that's enough. Elena didn't respond, but something in her expression softened. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. The car dropped Caleb at his building just before 11. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical labor. Inside, Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch again, the TV playing some late-night show on mute. He paid her, thanked her, and checked on Mia. She was sprawled across her bed as usual, Peanut the elephant clutched tight. He stood in the doorway watching her breathe, her face peaceful in sleep, completely unaware of the chaos her father was navigating. In his room, Caleb took off the tuxedo carefully, hanging it up exactly as he'd found it. Back in his own clothes, sweatpants and an old t-shirt, he felt more like himself. He sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from the same Seattle Tribune number. James Vickery, probably, following up on the scene at the gala. Caleb deleted the notifications without listening to the voicemails. There was a text from Elena, sent 20 minutes ago. Thank you for tonight. You were exactly what I needed. He read it twice, then typed back. Anytime. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Caleb set the phone down and lay back on the bed. His body ached from tension he'd been holding all night. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Something he hadn't felt in years. Pride, maybe. Or purpose. The feeling that he'd stood up for something and it had mattered. Sleep came easier than expected, dreamless and deep. Saturday morning, Mia woke him up early again, but this time he didn't mind. They made pancakes together, her standing on a chair to help stir the batter, getting flour everywhere and not caring. While they ate, she told him about her playdate with Sophie, about Captain Pickles the turtle, about the new book Miss Rodriguez was reading in class. Did you have fun at your fancy party? She asked between bites. It was interesting. Did you eat good food? I ate weird food. Weird how? Like food that looked like art. There was foam on top of fish. Mia made a face. That sounds gross. Kinda was. Can we go to the park today? Yeah, Bug, we can go to the park. They spent the afternoon at Volunteer Park again, Mia on the swings while Caleb pushed. The weather had cleared, leaving behind perfect spring sunshine and a breeze that smelled like rain and fresh-cut grass. Other families were there, couples with strollers, older kids playing soccer, a birthday party clustered around the picnic tables. Caleb watched them all, wondering about their lives. Whether they had enough money, whether they worried about rent and bills and the future, whether they felt like they were doing enough for their kids. Probably. Everyone worried. That was the human condition, constant anxiety that you weren't measuring up, that you should be doing more, better, different. Daddy, look! Mia had started pumping her legs herself, gaining height without his help. I'm doing it! I see you, Bug. You're doing great. She grinned, her hair flying behind her, completely present in the moment. No worries about money or social status or whether she belonged. Just joy, pure and uncomplicated. Caleb wanted that for her, wanted her to keep that innocence as long as possible. That's what all of this was for, the arrangement with Elena, the uncomfortable events, the scrutiny and judgment. If it meant Mia could stay a kid without worrying about adult problems, it was worth it. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Patricia Keene from the hotel company. I got your number from Elena. Hope that's okay. I wanted to reach out about something that might interest you. Before he could respond, another message came through. My company is expanding our community outreach program. We're looking for people with real-world experience to help develop job training initiatives. Your perspective would be valuable. Interested in grabbing coffee to discuss? Caleb stared at the messages, reading them 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Patricia Keene, who owned a chain of boutique hotels, was asking him, a guy who loaded trucks and worked warehouse shifts, to consult on a program because of what he'd said last night, because he'd been honest about his background instead of hiding it. He typed back, "Coffee sounds good. When works for you? The response came quickly. Tuesday afternoon? There's a place in Fremont, Milstead in Cumbria, 2 p.m. I'll be there. He pocketed his phone and looked back at Mia, still swinging, still smiling. Maybe this whole thing was going to work out after all. Maybe honesty wasn't just the right thing. Maybe it was the smart thing, too. Sunday passed quietly. Caleb caught up on laundry, helped Mia with homework they'd been neglecting, and made a proper dinner for once, spaghetti with sauce from a jar. But it was hot, and there was garlic bread, and that felt like success. Elena called that evening after Mia had gone to bed. Have you seen the news? No, should I have? Marcus gave an interview to a tech blog. About you. About us. Caleb's stomach sank. What did he say? That I'm exploiting you. That the arrangement is inappropriate and reflects poorly on my judgment. That someone in your position can't possibly consent to this kind of relationship because of the power imbalance. He's twisting everything. Of course he is. That's what he does. Elena's voice was tight with controlled anger. But he's also not entirely wrong. What? There is a power imbalance, Caleb. I have money and connections and influence. You have a 6-year-old daughter and bills you can barely pay. I should have thought more carefully about what I was asking you to do. You gave me a choice. Did I? Or did I give you an offer you couldn't refuse because you were desperate? Caleb sat down on his couch, the phone pressed against his ear. Outside, he could hear Mr. Nakamura playing his saxophone, the mournful notes bleeding through the floor. What are you saying? He asked quietly. I'm saying maybe Marcus is right. Maybe this was a mistake. Is that what you think? Silence stretched between them. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. I don't know what I think anymore. I just know that I don't want to hurt you, and I'm afraid that's exactly what I'm doing. You're not hurting me. You gave me an opportunity. An opportunity that's now making you a target, that's putting your name in blogs and making you defend yourself to strangers. Is that really better than where you were before? Caleb thought about the past few weeks. The money that had started accumulating in his account, the new shoes for Mia, the possibility of moving somewhere better, the coffee meeting with Patricia that might lead to something more. Then he thought about the reporter calls, Marcus Trent's predatory smile, the feeling of being examined and judged by people who'd decided his worth based on his bank balance. Yeah, he said finally. It is better because at least now I have options. Before, I just had survival. That's not enough reason to stay. It's my reason, and it's enough for me. Another long pause. He could hear her breathing, could picture her in whatever expensive apartment she lived in, probably staring out at the city lights, trying to solve this like it was a business problem with a clear answer. I need to think about this, Elena said. About whether we continue, or if I should end the arrangement before things get worse. That's your call. Caleb, no, I mean it. This is your world, your reputation, your decision. I'm just along for the ride. If you want out, I understand. You'd be okay with that, would he? Caleb looked around his apartment. The water-stained ceiling, the cheap furniture, the reality he'd been trying to climb out of. Going back to that felt like failure, but staying in something that made Elena uncomfortable felt worse. I'd survive, he said. I always do. Elena was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. Then, let me think about it. I'll call you in a few days. Okay? And Caleb, whatever I decide, this wasn't a mistake. You weren't a mistake. The line went dead. Caleb sat there holding the phone, staring at nothing. Mr. Nakamura's saxophone had stopped, leaving behind only silence and the distant sound of traffic. He thought about texting Elena back, saying something to convince her to keep going. But what could he say that wouldn't sound desperate? What argument could he make that wouldn't prove her point about power imbalances and exploitation? Instead, he got up and checked on Mia one more time. She was fine, of course, sleeping peacefully, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dreamed about. Astronauts and turtles and blanket forts. In his own bed, sleep was harder to find. He kept replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, wondering if he should have said something different. But eventually exhaustion won and he drifted off. His last thought, a simple hope that morning, would bring clarity. Neither of them seemed to have tonight. Monday morning started with a call from Event Staff Pro. Caleb, it's Marcus. Not Marcus Trent, his supervisor from the first event. I need you for a shift tonight. Cocktail reception, Capitol Hill, 6 to 10. I can't tonight. I've got something with my daughter. It pays 70 an hour, overtime after 8. Caleb did the math. 70 times 4 was 280, plus whatever overtime worked out to. That was good money for a Monday night. But Mia had asked him to help with her science project, the one that was due Wednesday. He'd promised. I really can't, he said. Your call. Just letting you know we've got work if you want it. After he hung up, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with his coffee, staring at his phone. A month ago, he would have taken that shift without thinking twice. Would have asked Mrs. Chen to watch Mia. Would have worked the 4 hours and pocketed the money and dealt with the guilt later. Now he could afford to say no. That realization hit harder than expected. The arrangement with Elena, however temporary it might be, had already changed things. Given him breathing room he hadn't had in years. If she ended it, if Marcus's pressure campaign worked, he'd go back to scrambling for every shift, every dollar, every opportunity to keep his head above water. The thought of that was exhausting. Tuesday afternoon, Caleb met Patricia at the coffee shop in Fremont. The place was small and crowded, filled with people working on laptops and having quiet conversations. Patricia was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee waiting. I ordered for you, she said. Hope you don't mind. Black, right? How did you... I pay attention, she smiled. Sit. He sat. The coffee was good, strong, and hot. Thank you for meeting with me, Patricia said. I know this must seem odd. Everything about the last month has seemed odd. She laughed. Fair point. Let me get straight to it. I meant what I said about our job training program. We're serious about expanding it, and we need people who understand what it's actually like to be on the other side. Looking for work, struggling to make ends meet, trying to balance everything while also trying to get ahead. I definitely understand that. I know you do. That's why I want to hire you as a consultant. Caleb blinked. What? Part-time, flexible hours. Help us design curriculum, vet training approaches, maybe even mentor some participants once we get the program running. She named a rate that made his coffee go down wrong. Interested? Why would you pay me that much? Because expertise is valuable, regardless of where it comes from. You've lived experiences that most consultants only theorize about. That's worth paying for. I don't have any credentials. You have life. That's better. Patricia leaned forward. Look, I'm not doing this as charity. I genuinely believe you can help us build something meaningful. But I'm also doing it because I saw what happened Friday night. I saw Marcus try to tear you down, and I saw you refuse to be diminished. That takes character, and character is in short supply in our world. Caleb sat back, his mind racing. This was real. An actual consulting position, not the fake story Elena had been using as cover. A chance to do work that mattered, work that used the life he'd lived instead of treating it like something to overcome. I'm interested, he said carefully. But I need to be honest with you about something. Go ahead. I don't know how long my arrangement with Elena is going to last. Things are complicated right now, and she might end it. If that happens, I lose the network, the access, all of it. I don't want you hiring me because you think I come with connections I might not have next week. Patricia smiled. I'm hiring you because you know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still worry about making rent. Elena's network has nothing to do with it. If your arrangement ends, this offer still stands. Okay. Then, yes, I'm very interested. Excellent. I'll have my assistant send over a contract. We can start small, a few hours a week, see how it goes, build from there. They talked for another half hour about specifics, about what the program might look like, about Caleb's experiences and insights. By the time he left the coffee shop, his head was spinning. This was happening, really happening. A legitimate way forward that didn't depend on standing next to Elena at events or navigating Marcus Trent's attacks. He texted Elena as soon as he got to his truck. Patricia Keene just offered me a consulting job, a real one. The response came fast. That's wonderful. You deserve it. I wanted you to know, in case it changes your decision about us. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, can we meet? Tonight, if you're free? Caleb thought about Mia's science project, the promise he'd made. But this felt important, worth figuring out. I can do 8:30. After my daughter's in bed, I'll send a car. The car arrived at 8:40. 10 minutes late because Mia's science project had run over. She'd wanted to add more labels to her poster board about the solar system, insisting that Neptune needed better facts because everyone always forgot about Neptune. Caleb had helped her print out additional information from the library website, while Mrs. Chen made hot chocolate and pretended not to notice how distracted he was. Elena had texted an address instead of naming a restaurant. When the driver pulled up outside a sleek glass building in Belltown, Caleb's confusion must have shown. Ms. Varelli's residence, the driver said. Penthouse level. The concierge will direct you. The lobby was all marble and modern furniture, the kind of space designed to make people feel small. A young man in a sharp suit greeted Caleb with professional courtesy that didn't quite hide his assessment. Rich people paid people to judge visitors before they ever made it upstairs. Mr. Hayes, Ms. Varelli is expecting you. Elevator on the right, penthouse access code is 8742. The elevator was glass-walled, offering views of the city as it climbed. Caleb watched Seattle spread out below him, the Space Needle lit up against the dark sky. Elliott Bay glittering with reflected lights, the highway systems like glowing arteries. Up here, everything looked ordered and manageable. Down there, people were living messy, complicated lives. The view didn't show the struggle, just the lights. The elevator opened directly into Elena's apartment, not a hallway or a landing, just straight into her space. The contrast with his own building's dingy corridors was almost funny. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows silhouetted against the city lights. She'd changed from whatever she'd worn to work. Now she was in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down, no makeup that he could see. It was the most casual he'd ever seen her, and somehow it made her seem younger, more real. "Thanks for coming," she said without turning around. "Thanks for inviting me. Can I get you something? Water, coffee, something stronger?" "Water's fine." She moved to the open kitchen, all stainless steel and dark countertops, and poured 2 glasses from a pitcher in the refrigerator. Handed him one, then gestured toward the living area. The furniture was expensive but sparse. Nothing personal visible anywhere. No photos, no knickknacks, nothing that said someone actually lived here beyond the basics of existence. They sat on opposite ends of a gray couch that probably cost more than his truck. "Nice place," Caleb said, because someone had to break the silence. "It's adequate." That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. "I'm not here very often. It functions as a place to sleep between obligations." She took a sip of water, set it down on the glass coffee table. "I asked you here because I owe you an explanation. About Sunday. About what I said." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. I created this situation. I pulled you into my world, and now I'm second-guessing whether I had any right to do that." She finally looked at him. "Patricia offering you that job changes things. It means you have options now that don't involve me. Is that what this is about? You want out and you need me to have a soft landing first?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." She ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "Do you know what it's like to spend 8 years building something and then wake up one day and realize you're not sure why you're still doing it?" "Can't say I do. Everything I've worked for, the company, the reputation, the success, it all requires constant maintenance, constant performance. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that I'm allowed to want things that don't serve the brand." She stood, paced to the window. "You make me want things I've convinced myself I don't need." Caleb stayed quiet, letting her work through whatever she was trying to say. "When I started this arrangement," Elena continued, "I told myself it was practical. I needed someone grounded, someone who'd keep me honest, someone who didn't want anything from me. But that's not what happened. What happened is I started looking forward to seeing you, started caring what you thought, started feeling less alone when you were around." "Is that a bad thing?" "It's a complicated thing." She turned to face him. "Because I'm your employer. Because there's a power dynamic that makes any personal feelings inappropriate. Because Marcus Trent is absolutely right that I put you in an impossible position." "You keep saying that, but you're not actually asking me how I feel about any of this." Elena blinked. "What? You're making all these decisions about what's appropriate and what's ethical and what I can or can't handle. But you haven't once asked me what I want. Because what you want might be influenced by what you need. The money, the stability, that clouds judgment. So does loneliness." Caleb set down his water glass. "You want honesty? Here it is. Yeah, I needed the money when I said yes. Yeah, the financial security matters. But that's not why I keep showing up. I keep showing up because for the first time in years, I feel like someone sees me as more than just a paycheck short of disaster. You see me. Not the struggling single dad, not the guy working 3 jobs, just me. And that matters more than you think. Elena's expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through the professional mask. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? That's not how risk management works. This isn't a business deal, Elena. Isn't it? I'm paying you to stand next to me at events. Is that all you think this is? She didn't answer. Couldn't, maybe. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them seemed ready to say out loud. Caleb stood. Look, if you want to end this arrangement, end it. I'll survive. Patricia's job means I'm not completely back to square one. But don't end it because you're afraid of what it might become. End it because you genuinely don't want me around. Otherwise, you're just running. And if I am running, maybe that's the smart choice. Maybe. Or maybe it's just the safe one. He moved toward the elevator. Either way, it's your call. Wait. He stopped, hand on the elevator button. Elena crossed the distance between them, stopped a few feet away. I don't want to end it. That's the problem. I should want to, but I don't. Then don't. It's not that simple. Why not? Because... She closed her eyes, took a breath. Because the last time I let someone matter to me, it ended badly. Really badly. And I swore I wouldn't do that again. Wouldn't let anyone get close enough to it. She cut herself off, but Caleb filled in the blanks. The broken engagement mentioned in that article. Someone who'd gotten past her defenses and then left damage in their wake. I'm not whoever hurt you before, he said quietly. I know. That's what scares me. She met his eyes. You're better. Which means if this goes wrong, it's going to hurt worse. Caleb understood that math, had done similar calculations himself every time he'd considered dating after Stephanie left. The risk versus reward equation, where the risk always seemed to outweigh any possible reward. But standing here, watching Elena struggle with the same fear, he realized something. You know what I tell Mia when she's scared to try something new? He said. I tell her that being scared means it matters. That if it didn't matter, she wouldn't be scared at all. So the fear is actually proof that it's worth doing. That's very wise for a 6-year-old. She doesn't always listen, but the principle stands. Elena smiled slightly. What do you want from this, Caleb? From me? Honestly, I don't know yet, but I'd like the chance to find out. She studied him for a long moment, her expression shifting through emotions he couldn't quite read. Then she nodded, decision made. Okay, we keep going, but I need you to promise me something. What? If this gets too messy, if my world starts damaging yours in ways that matter, you'll tell me. You won't just endure it because you need the money or feel obligated. You'll be honest. I can do that. And I need to adjust the arrangement, make it more formal, more protected. I'll have my lawyer draft something that ensures you're covered regardless of what happens between us personally. You don't have to. Yes, I do. If we're blurring professional and personal lines, you need protection, real protection in writing. Her tone was firm, non-negotiable. Caleb recognized when to stop arguing. Okay. The tension between them eased slightly, though it didn't disappear entirely. Elena walked him back to the elevator, her movements more relaxed than they'd been all night. There's another event Friday, she said. Smaller gathering, private dinner with some potential investors, less formal than the gala. You want me there? If you're willing. I'm willing. She reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. The touch was simple, but it sent electricity up his arm. Thank you for being patient with me while I figure this out. We're both figuring it out. I suppose we are. The elevator arrived. Caleb stepped in, turned to face her. She stayed in the doorway, arms crossed loosely, looking more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. Elena? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for. The doors closed before she could respond, but he saw the surprise on her face, the way his words landed. The elevator descended, his reflection staring back at him from the glass walls. He looked tired, felt tired. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. A cautious hope that maybe, possibly, This whole messy situation might actually work out. The driver was waiting outside. The ride home was quiet, Caleb lost in thought. He kept replaying the conversation, analyzing what had been said and what had been carefully avoided. Elena was scared. He got that. But she was also trying, and that counted for something. Back at his apartment, Mrs. Chen had fallen asleep watching a cooking show. He paid her, thanked her, and checked on Mia. Her solar system poster was propped against the wall, Neptune's new facts proudly displayed in her careful handwriting. He smiled despite the late hour and the emotional weight of the evening. Wednesday brought a different kind of chaos. Patricia's assistant called in the morning with contract details for the consulting work. The terms were fair, more than fair actually, 15 hours a week at a rate that made Caleb's head spin, flexible scheduling, and a 3-month trial period to see if the fit was right for both parties. "We'd like you to start next Monday if possible," the assistant said. "Patricia wants you to sit in on our initial planning meetings for the job training program. Monday works." "Excellent. I'll email you the contract and the meeting details." After he hung up, Caleb sat at his kitchen table staring at nothing. 2 weeks ago, he'd been piecing together enough hours to cover rent. Now he had actual consulting work, a steady arrangement with Elena that might evolve into something more, and possibilities opening up that he hadn't dared imagine. The fear came with the hope. Fear that it was too good to be true, that something would collapse, that he'd somehow screw it up. But he pushed the fear down and focused on the practical next steps. Read the contract carefully. Make arrangements for Mia's schedule. Figure out what consulting on a job training program actually involved. Thursday afternoon, Marcus Trent struck again. Caleb was at the library with Mia, helping her research Neptune facts for extra credit, when his phone lit up with notifications. Text messages, email alerts, missed calls. He ignored them until Mia was absorbed in a book about planets, then stepped outside to see what was happening. The tech blog that Marcus had given his first interview to had published a follow-up piece. This one was worse. It included photos of Caleb's apartment building, his truck, even a grainy shot of him picking Mia up from school. The article was framed as investigative journalism, exposing the real story behind Elena Varelli's mysterious companion. But it was character assassination dressed up as concern. The piece painted Caleb as an opportunist taking advantage of a successful woman. It questioned his motives, his background, his fitness as a parent. It implied things without stating them outright, letting readers draw their own ugly conclusions. And it quoted anonymous sources from Elena's industry who questioned her judgment and professionalism. Caleb's hand shook as he read it. This wasn't just about him anymore. They'd brought Mia into it, published her school's location, made her part of the story. The violation of that, the danger of it, made his vision blur with anger. He called Elena. She answered immediately. "I saw it. They published photos of my daughter's school. I know. My lawyer is already drafting a cease and desist. This crosses lines that even Marcus should know better than to cross. What if someone shows up there? What if they try to approach her or—" "Caleb, breathe. I've already contacted the school. They're implementing additional security protocols. Nobody gets near Mia without going through proper channels." "You called her school?" 10 minutes ago. I have some connections on their board. They're taking this seriously." Some of the panic eased, not all of it, but enough that he could think clearly. "What do we do about the article?" "We respond strategically, not emotionally. Marcus wants you to react, to lash out, to prove his narrative that you're unstable." Elena's voice was steel. "We don't give him that satisfaction. Instead, we show him what happens when he threatens the wrong person." "What does that mean?" "It means I make some calls, pull some strings, remind certain people that Marcus has his own skeletons, and I've been very gracious about not mentioning them publicly. Until now." "Elena, he made this personal when he brought your daughter into it. I'm just playing by the rules he established." She paused. "Trust me on this?" Caleb looked back through the library window at Mia, still absorbed in her book, completely unaware that strangers were writing about her, judging her father, trying to tear down the fragile stability he'd built for them. "Yeah," he said, "I trust you." "I trust— Good. Keep Mia close this week. Vary your routines if you can, and don't talk to any media under any circumstances." "Wasn't planning on it. I'll call you tomorrow with updates." "And Caleb? I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of. It's not your fault. Isn't it? I pulled you into this world. Marcus is just exploiting the opportunity I created." Marcus is exploiting it because he's a predator. That's on him, not you. She was quiet for a moment. I don't deserve your faith in me. Lucky for you, I'm not very good at risk assessment. That got a small laugh. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Inside the library, Mia looked up when he returned. Is everything okay, Daddy? Yeah, Bug. Everything's fine. You look worried. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. She studied him with those serious eyes that saw more than he wanted them to. Is it the pretty lady? Ms. Varelli, yeah. We're handling some complicated business things. Do you like her? The question caught him off guard. What? Do you like her? Like her? Where did that come from? Mia shrugged. Sophie's mom is dating someone new, and Sophie says you can tell because her mom smiles different now. You smile different when you talk about Ms. Varelli. 6 years old, and already too perceptive for her own good. Caleb sat down next to her, choosing his words carefully. Ms. Varelli is my friend, and yeah, I like her, but it's complicated, Bug. Adult stuff that doesn't really have easy answers. Sophie says adult stuff is just kid stuff, but with more money involved. Sophie might be onto something. Mia grinned, then returned to her planet book. Caleb sat with her, pretending to read over her shoulder while his mind spun through everything happening. The article. Marcus's escalation. Elena's promise to handle it. The careful dance they were doing around feelings neither of them seemed ready to name. Friday's dinner was at a restaurant Caleb had never heard of, the kind of place that didn't advertise because the people who needed to know about it already did. Elena had sent different instructions this time. Meet her there directly instead of arriving separately. Come at 7:30. Dress code business casual instead of formal. The shift felt significant, though Caleb couldn't articulate exactly why. He got there 15 minutes early anyway, old habits impossible to break. The restaurant was tucked into a renovated building in Pioneer Square, understated elegance instead of showy luxury. The host checked his name against a list, then led him to a private dining room in the back. Elena was already there, talking to 3 people Caleb didn't recognize. She wore gray slacks and a burgundy blouse, professional but softer than her usual event attire. When she saw him, something in her expression lightened. Caleb, perfect timing. She gestured him over. I want you to meet some people. This is Richard Chen, Sarah Okonkwo, and David Marquez. They're the potential investors I mentioned. Handshakes all around. The 3 of them were younger than the usual crowd at Elena's events, mid-30s, maybe early 40s. They dressed well, but not ostentatiously. There was an energy to them that felt different from the stiff formality of galas and fundraisers. Caleb Hayes, Richard said, recognition in his eyes. You're the guy from the tech gala, the one who told Marcus Trent to shove it. I didn't exactly say that. No, but the implication was clear. That was beautiful. They sat down to dinner. The conversation flowed easily, surprisingly so. These weren't people trying to prove anything or establish dominance. They talked about their companies. Richard ran a sustainable manufacturing startup. Sarah had a fintech platform focused on underbanked communities. David was developing affordable housing solutions. Real businesses trying to solve real problems. And they talked to Caleb like he belonged at the table, asked his opinion, listened to his answers, built on his observations. It was the opposite of every other event he'd attended with Elena, where he'd mostly stayed quiet and observed. Over the main course, Sarah turned to him directly. Elena mentioned you're starting consulting work with Patricia Keene's hotel group. What's that going to focus on? Job training program development, helping create pathways for people who don't have traditional credentials or experience. That's exactly the kind of initiative we need more of. Too many programs are designed by people who've never actually struggled to find work. She leaned forward, genuinely interested. What's your approach going to be? Caleb thought about it. Honesty, mostly. Stop pretending that motivation is the problem. Most people want to work, want to succeed. The barriers are practical: childcare, transportation, inflexible scheduling, employers who won't look past gaps in resumes. Fix the practical stuff and the rest follows. That's refreshing. Most workforce development programs focus on fixing the workers instead of fixing the systems. Because fixing systems is harder and less profitable. David laughed. I like him. Elena, you should bring him to more meetings. Elena smiled. I'm working on it. The evening continued in that vein, actual conversation instead of networking theater, ideas instead of posturing. By the time dessert arrived, Caleb had almost forgotten this was supposed to be about Elena securing investment. It felt more like friends gathering to talk about work they cared about. After dinner, as the others were saying goodbye and heading out, Richard pulled Caleb aside. Hey, I don't know what your situation is with other opportunities, but Sarah and I are always looking for people with real-world operational experience. If you're interested in consulting work beyond Patricia's project, let me know. He handed Caleb a business card. Actual interest, not pity or charity. Caleb pocketed the card, still processing. When everyone had left, Elena and Caleb stood outside the restaurant. The evening air was cool but not cold, spring settling into Seattle with characteristic indecision. That went well, Elena said. Did you get what you needed? Investment-wise? Probably. Richard and Sarah are both interested in moving forward. She looked at him. But that's not why I invited you tonight. No. I wanted you to meet people who build things that matter, who use business as a tool for solving problems instead of just accumulating wealth. I thought you'd like them. I did. They're different. They're what I wish more of our world looked like. She paused. And I wanted them to see you as I see you. Not as my mysterious companion or Marcus's target, just as someone worth knowing. The honesty of it hit Caleb harder than expected. Thank you. For what? For caring about that? About how people see me? Elena stepped closer, and in the streetlight her eyes looked darker, more uncertain. I care about more than that. Yeah? Yeah. She took a breath. My lawyer sent over the revised contract. Did you get it? This afternoon. Haven't read it yet. It changes the terms significantly. Guaranteed minimum payments regardless of events attended, severance protection, provisions that separate the professional arrangement from anything personal that might develop. She held his gaze. I meant what I said about protecting you. Whatever happens between us, I don't want you vulnerable. What if I don't want protection? What if I want the risk? Then you're braver than I am. Or stupider. She smiled. Maybe both. They stood there, the space between them charged with possibility. Caleb thought about closing that distance, about what it would mean to cross that line. But something held him back. Not fear exactly, more like respect for the weight of the choice. Elena seemed to feel it too. She reached out, touched his arm briefly. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. Okay. But Caleb, thank you for tonight, for being exactly who you are. That's all I've got. It's enough, more than enough. She left in her car, and Caleb walked to where he'd parked several blocks away. The night was quiet. Most businesses closed. Just the occasional bar or restaurant still lit up. He thought about the evening, about the people he'd met, about the way Elena had looked at him when she said she cared. This was really happening. Whatever this was, it was becoming something real and complicated and potentially wonderful. The fear was still there, lurking underneath everything, but so was hope, stubborn and persistent. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Contract revision includes a clause that either party can terminate for personal reasons without penalty. I wanted you to know you always have an out. No judgment, no consequences, just choice. He read it twice, understanding what she was really saying. She was giving him freedom to leave if things got too complicated, but she was also saying she didn't want him to. The contradiction was very her, protecting him while hoping he wouldn't need protection. He typed back, I know, thank you, but I'm not looking for an out. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, good, neither am I. Caleb pocketed his phone and drove home through empty streets, the city quiet around him. When he got back to the apartment, Mrs. Chen was awake for once, watching a late show and knitting something pink and complicated. Good evening? She asked. Yeah, really good. She smiled knowingly. The pretty lady, she makes you happy. Is it that obvious? Very obvious. But obvious is not bad. Happiness should be obvious. In Mia's room, he found her asleep with her Neptune poster carefully rolled up next to her bed, ready for school Monday. He sat on the edge of her mattress and watched her breathe, this small person who'd become his entire world, who depended on him to make good choices. Was Elena a good choice? He didn't know yet. But she felt right in a way nothing had in years, and that had to count for something. His phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Elena. Marcus's blog ran a retraction. Turns out his anonymous sources don't exist and his photographer violated stalking laws. The article's been pulled and they're issuing a public apology. How did you manage that? I reminded some people that I have better lawyers and fewer ethical boundaries when someone threatens a child. Marcus has been warned that further action will have consequences he won't enjoy. Thank you. Always. Get some sleep. Caleb set his phone down and lay back on Mia's floor, staring at her glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Marcus had been neutralized, at least temporarily. The arrangement with Elena was evolving into something neither of them had planned. Patricia's job was real and starting Monday. Everything was changing, faster than he could process. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, the change felt like progress instead of just survival. And that was something worth holding on to. Monday morning started with Patricia's job training program meeting, and Caleb arrived 20 minutes early because his nerves wouldn't let him do otherwise. The hotel company's headquarters occupied 3 floors of a downtown building with views of the waterfront. Patricia's assistant met him in the lobby and walked him to a conference room where 5 other people were already gathered around a long table covered in coffee cups and notebooks. Patricia stood when he entered. Everyone, this is Caleb Hayes. He's joining us as a consultant to help develop the practical curriculum side of our program. She turned to him. Caleb, this is the core team. We've got HR, operations, 2 of our general managers, and our community partnerships coordinator. Handshakes around the table. The operations manager, a woman named Jennifer with sharp eyes and graying hair, studied him openly. Patricia mentioned you come from a non-traditional background, Jennifer said. It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't not a question either. That's a polite way of putting it, Caleb said. I've worked hourly jobs most of my adult life. Warehouses, event staff, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on. And now you're consulting on workforce development. Jennifer's tone was neutral, unreadable. Now I'm trying to make sure the program you build actually works for people like me, instead of just sounding good in a press release. The room went quiet. Then Jennifer smiled. Good. We've got enough people who talk theory. We need someone who knows what it's actually like out there. The meeting ran for 2 hours. They discussed program structure, partnership opportunities with community colleges, potential employer relationships. Caleb stayed mostly quiet at first, listening and observing. But when they started talking about scheduling requirements, mandatory attendance during business hours, strict punctuality policies, he spoke up. That won't work. Everyone turned to look at him. Why not? Asked one of the general managers. Because the people who need this program most are the ones working 2 or 3 jobs already. They can't just show up Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to noon. They've got shifts, childcare pickups, bus schedules that don't align with your timeline. Caleb leaned forward. You want this to work? Make it flexible. Evening options, weekend sessions, online components for people who can't physically be here. Meet them where they are instead of expecting them to conform to what's convenient for you. Jennifer was taking notes. What else? Childcare. If you're asking single parents to commit time to training, you need to provide somewhere safe for their kids to be. And not just during the sessions, before and after too, because commute times matter. That's expensive, the HR director said. So is high turnover because you hired people who couldn't maintain the schedule you forced on them, which costs more in the long run. Patricia smiled from the head of the table. This is exactly why you're here. Keep going. By the time the meeting ended, Caleb had filled 3 pages of notes with ideas that had come from lived experience rather than theory. The team seemed genuinely interested, asking follow-up questions, pushing back on some points but listening to his reasoning. It felt real, like work that might actually matter. Afterward, Patricia walked him to the elevator. That was excellent. You challenged assumptions they didn't even know they were making. I might have been too direct. You were exactly direct enough. Jennifer already texted me that she wants you in every planning meeting going forward. Patricia paused. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. How are things with Elena? I saw Marcus's article before it got pulled. That must have been difficult. Caleb chose his words carefully. It's complicated, but we're figuring it out. Good. She deserves someone who sees her as more than just what she's built, and you deserve someone who values what you bring beyond labor. Patricia touched his arm lightly. Don't let people like Marcus convince you that you don't belong in these spaces. You belong wherever you choose to be. The words stuck with Caleb as he left the building and headed to pick up Mia from school. Belonging wasn't something he'd thought much about. He'd been too focused on surviving to worry about where he fit. But maybe Patricia was right. Maybe belonging was a choice, not a permission slip handed out by gatekeepers. That evening, Elena called while Caleb was helping Mia with her spelling homework. "How was your first day?" "Better than expected. I think I might actually be useful to them." "Of course you are. I could have told you that." He heard something in her voice. Tiredness, maybe, or stress. "Can we talk?" "Not on the phone. In person." "When?" "Tonight, if possible. I know it's last minute, but something's come up." The tension in her voice made his stomach tighten. "What happened?" "I'd rather explain face to face. Can you come by around 8? After Mrs. Chen arrived and Mia was settled with her books, Caleb drove to Elena's building. The concierge recognized him this time, waved him through without the security code ritual. In the elevator, he tried to guess what was wrong. Marcus escalating again? Problems with her company? Something about their arrangement? Elena answered the door in workout clothes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup. She looked younger and more exhausted than he'd ever seen her. "Thanks for coming." She stepped aside to let him in. "I'm sorry about the short notice." "What's going on?" She walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of wine without asking if he wanted any, handed him one, then leaned against the counter. "I got a call this afternoon from Marcus's lawyer." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What did he want?" "To inform me that Marcus is filing a lawsuit against my company, claiming that I've engaged in unfair business practices, defamation, and something about tortious interference with his contracts." She took a long drink of wine. "It's bullshit. Complete fabrication. But it's also expensive bullshit that will tie up resources and create negative publicity." "Because of the blog article? Because you got them to retract it? Because I humiliated him? Because you humiliated him at the gala? Because he can't stand that I won't play by his rules?" Elena set down her glass with more force than necessary. "My lawyer says we'll win, but it could take months, maybe longer, and the whole time he'll be spinning narratives, planting stories, making my life as difficult as possible." "I'm sorry. It's not your fault." "Isn't it? If I hadn't been at these events, if I hadn't pushed back against him, then he would have found some other excuse. This is who Marcus is. He destroys things because he can, because it makes him feel powerful." She rubbed her temples. "I'm telling you this because it's going to get messier before it gets better, and I need to know if you're prepared for that." Caleb set down his wine glass. "What are you really asking?" "I'm asking if you want out. If this is too much, too complicated, too risky for someone in your position." She met his eyes. "I would understand. I wouldn't blame you. I'd make sure you were protected financially, that the termination clause in your contract was activated with full benefits. You could walk away clean." "Is that what you want? For me to walk away?" "No, but what I want and what's best for you might be different things." Caleb crossed the space between them, close enough to see the fine lines of stress around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "Stop making decisions for me. Stop assuming you know what I can or can't handle. I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection. I need honesty. So here's mine. I'm not going anywhere. Not because of the money, not because I'm obligated, but because I choose to stay. Whatever Marcus throws at us, we deal with it, together." Elena's carefully maintained control cracked. "Why? Why would you choose this mess?" "Because I care about you. Because, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm building something instead of just surviving. Because you see me as a person instead of a problem to solve." He took a breath. "And because I think you care about me too, even if you're terrified to admit it." She didn't answer immediately, just stared at him with those dark eyes that usually calculated everything, but now showed only uncertainty. Then, quietly, "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Letting people in. Trusting that they won't leave when things get hard." "Then it's lucky I'm not going anywhere." Elena laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both. We've established that already." She closed the remaining distance between them, and this time when she reached for him, it wasn't a brief touch or a professional gesture. She wrapped her arms around him and held on like he was something solid in a world that kept shifting. Caleb held her back, feeling the tension in her shoulders, the way she was finally letting herself be vulnerable. They stood like that for a long time, no words necessary. Eventually, Elena pulled back, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm a mess. You're human. There's a difference. I don't usually let people see this side. I know. I'm honored that you let me. She smiled slightly. You're handling this better than I am. That's because I've got less to lose. When you start from the bottom, everything else is just different kinds of up. That's a remarkably optimistic way of looking at systematic inequality. Who said I was optimistic? I'm just realistic about what rock bottom actually looks like. Elena moved to the couch, and Caleb followed. They sat closer than they had before, the earlier distance replaced with something more comfortable, more real. Tell me about your daughter, Elena said. Really tell me, not the highlights you share at events. So Caleb did. He told her about Mia's obsession with space, about the way she argued like a lawyer at 6 years old, about her mother leaving, and how he'd had to figure out parenting alone while working whatever jobs he could find. He told her about the nights when he'd been so exhausted he'd fallen asleep on the floor of Mia's room because moving to his own bed felt impossible. About the guilt that came with never feeling like he was enough. Enough money, enough time, enough patience, enough anything. Elena listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or solutions. Just listened like what he was saying mattered. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, she's lucky to have you. That's what everyone says, but some days I'm not sure I believe it. Because you measure success by what you can provide materially. But she doesn't need you to be rich. She needs you to show up, to care, to see her. And you do all of that. You sound pretty certain for someone who's never met her. I don't need to meet her to see the evidence. You prioritize her above everything else. You make choices that put her first even when they cost you. That's not nothing, Caleb. He thought about Mia, probably asleep by now with Peanut the elephant tucked under her chin, completely unaware of the adult complications surrounding her father. I want to give her better than what I had. What did you have? A dad who worked himself to death trying to prove he mattered. A mom who left because she couldn't handle the pressure, constant stress about money, about stability, about whether we'd make it through another month. He paused. I don't want Mia to remember her childhood as just survival. Then give her what you're giving her now. Presence, attention, the knowledge that she matters more than any job or opportunity or amount of money. Elena shifted to face him more directly. That's the thing people like Marcus don't understand. They measure worth in dollars and influence. But real wealth is knowing someone will show up for you regardless of what you can offer in return. Is that what you want? Someone who shows up? I want someone who sees past the empire I've built to the person who's terrified it's all I have. She took a shaky breath. I want what you have with Mia, that uncomplicated certainty that you matter to each other beyond any transaction. It's not always uncomplicated. Kids are experts at complicating things. But the foundation is solid. That's what I mean. Caleb reached for her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. The gesture felt significant, like crossing a line they'd been dancing around for weeks. So build that foundation. With me, if you want. But build it. What if I screw it up? Then we deal with it. Figure it out. Try again. He squeezed her hand. That's how this works. Not perfectly, not smoothly, just honestly. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being afraid all the time. That makes two of us. They stayed like that, tangled together on her expensive couch in her expensive apartment, finding something that had nothing to do with money or status or any of the things that had brought them together initially. Just two people who'd been alone for too long, taking a chance on being less alone together. Later, much later, Caleb checked his phone and saw it was past 11. I should go. Mrs. Chen's probably asleep on my couch again. You could stay. Elena said it quietly, uncertain. I'm not suggesting anything except that it's late and you could sleep in the guest room if you wanted. I need to be there when Mia wakes up. It's our routine. I understand. She walked him to the elevator. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for staying, for not running when I gave you the opportunity. Thank you for giving me the choice. The elevator arrived. Before he could step in, Elena pulled him back and kissed him. It was brief, tentative, like she was still asking permission even as she took the action. Caleb kissed her back, one hand cupping her face, trying to communicate everything he didn't have words for. When they broke apart, Elena looked stunned by her own boldness. I probably shouldn't have done that. Probably not. But I'm glad you did. This changes things.
Yeah, it does. Are you okay with that? Caleb smiled. Are you? She considered, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go. The ride home felt different. Everything felt different, like the world had shifted slightly on its axis, and he was still finding his balance. But it was a good different, a hopeful different.
At the apartment, Mrs. Chen was indeed asleep on the couch. He paid her extra for the late night and checked on Mia, who'd kicked off all her blankets and was sprawled diagonally across her bed. He tucked her back in, pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Love you, Bug," he whispered. She mumbled something in her sleep that might have been "love you too," or might have been nonsense. Either way, it made him smile. The next 3 weeks unfolded with a strange new rhythm. Caleb worked with Patricia's team on the job training program, contributing ideas that got refined into actual curriculum. The meetings stretched from once a week to 3 times, and Jennifer started sending him materials to review between sessions, valuing his input enough to want more of it. He attended 2 more events with Elena, but they were different now. Smaller gatherings, more intimate. People who knew about them, about the shift from professional arrangement to something undefined but real. Richard and Sarah became regular fixtures, along with a few others who seemed to exist in Elena's world without the performance and posturing. Marcus's lawsuit proceeded slowly, expensively, exactly as predicted. Elena's lawyer filed motions, Marcus's lawyer filed counter-motions, and everyone billed hours while the actual substance of the case remained murky. But Marcus himself stayed quiet, no more articles or public attacks. Elena's warning about consequences seemed to have created a temporary stalemate, and Caleb and Elena navigated the complications of being together without quite defining what together meant. They had dinner twice a week, sometimes with Mia, sometimes just the 2 of them. Elena came to one of Mia's school events, a science fair where Mia's Neptune project earned 2nd place, and charmed the teachers without trying. Mia declared her nice but kind of fancy, which seemed like a fair assessment. It wasn't perfect. Elena still struggled with vulnerability, with admitting she needed anything from anyone. Caleb still worried about money despite having more stability than he'd had in years. They argued about small things, scheduling conflicts, miscommunications, the ongoing question of how public to make their relationship. But it was real, messy and complicated and real. Then, 5 weeks after that conversation in Elena's apartment, Marcus made his final move. Caleb was picking Mia up from school when his phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, emails, all arriving simultaneously. He ignored them until Mia was buckled into the truck, then pulled over to see what was happening. Marcus had gone to a major news outlet with a new story. Not a blog, not a tech publication, but actual media. The article framed the entire situation as a scandal. Wealthy consultant Elena Varelli exploiting vulnerable single father, using money and power to manipulate him into compromising situations, potential ethical violations in her business practices. It quoted the lawsuit, referenced the retracted blog post, and included new anonymous sources from Elena's industry. But this time, Marcus had made a critical mistake. The article included specific allegations about Elena's company, falsified documents, misrepresented client results, financial irregularities. Things that weren't just unethical, but potentially illegal. Things that, if true, would destroy her business. Things that were completely, provably false. Caleb called Elena immediately. "I saw it," she said before he could speak. "My lawyer is already on it." "This is bad." "No, this is checkmate." "What?" Marcus got desperate, made claims he can't back up with evidence because the evidence doesn't exist, which means we can now go after him for defamation with actual damages, real ones, not the vague nonsense in his lawsuit. Elena's voice was sharp with controlled anger. He finally gave me the opening I needed. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago. Stop playing defense and start playing offense." 2 days later, Elena's lawyers filed a countersuit. Not just against Marcus personally, but against his company, alleging systematic harassment, defamation, tortious interference, and a few other legal terms Caleb didn't fully understand. The filing was accompanied by evidence, emails, records of Marcus's previous attacks on competitors, testimony from people he'd targeted before. Elena had been collecting ammunition for years. She'd just finally decided to use it. The news cycle shifted overnight. Suddenly, Marcus was the story, not Elena. His past behavior got exposed, his business practices questioned, his lawsuit revealed as part of a pattern of vindictive attacks. The same outlet that had published his accusations ran a follow-up piece about his history, the tone significantly different. Marcus's company put out a statement about reviewing the allegations. Translation, they were cutting him loose. Within a week, Marcus withdrew his lawsuit. His lawyer sent a terse letter about wanting to avoid protracted litigation, but everyone knew what it really meant. He'd lost. Elena's countersuit proceeded regardless. "I'm not letting him walk away from this," she told Caleb over dinner at her apartment. "He threatened you, threatened Mia by publishing information about her school. That doesn't get forgiven." "Will you win?" "Probably. My lawyers are very good and Marcus's paper trail is extensive. But winning isn't really the point." "Then what is?" "The point is that people like Marcus need to learn that actions have consequences. That you can't just destroy people for sport and expect to walk away clean." She set down her fork, her expression serious. "And the point is that you deserve to see that standing up to bullies actually works sometimes." Caleb thought about that, about Marcus's predatory smile at the charity dinner, about the violations and attacks and fear, about how small he'd felt in those moments, how powerless. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For fighting back. For me, for Mia, for yourself. For showing me that not everyone with power uses it to hurt people." Elena reached across the table and took his hand. "You would have done the same if our positions were reversed. Maybe. But I like that I didn't have to find out." The lawsuit settled 3 months later. Marcus's company paid damages, issued public apologies, and Marcus himself quietly left Seattle for a position in another city. Elena donated the settlement money to organizations supporting single parents and workforce development programs. "Seems fitting," she said when Caleb asked about it. "Turn his attacks into something that actually helps people." By then, other things had shifted too. Patricia's job training program launched with Caleb as a permanent consultant, 15 hours a week that sometimes stretched to 20 when they were developing new material. The work was fulfilling in ways he hadn't expected, watching people who'd been written off by traditional systems gain skills and confidence. Elena's company weathered the Marcus situation without significant damage. If anything, the way she'd handled it enhanced her reputation. People liked seeing her defend herself and others, liked the proof that she had principles beyond profit. And Caleb and Elena stopped pretending what they had was temporary or undefined. They were together. Dating, in a relationship, whatever words fit. It wasn't always easy. Elena still traveled constantly for work. Caleb still had Mia to prioritize. Their worlds remained fundamentally different in ways that created friction. But they figured it out, compromised, made space for each other in lives that had been self-contained for too long. 6 months after that first event at the Whitmore Hotel, Caleb signed a lease on a new apartment. 2 bedrooms, working heat, a building with actual security, and neighbors who didn't scream through walls. Mia got her own room, painted the pale blue she'd been requesting, with space for all her books about planets and astronauts. Elena helped them move, showing up in jeans and a t-shirt, carrying boxes alongside Mrs. Chen and Patricia and a few others who'd become part of Caleb's expanding circle. At one point, Caleb found her in Mia's room, helping arrange stuffed animals on the new bed. "This is good," Elena said, looking around at the space. "She deserves this." "So do you," Mia piped up from the doorway. She'd appointed herself supervisor of the move, taking the job very seriously. "Daddy says you work too much and need more fun," Elena laughed. "Did he now?" "Yep, he says you're very smart, but you forget to have fun sometimes." "Your dad is probably right." Mia considered this. "You could have fun with us. We're going to paint my bookshelf tomorrow. You could help if you want." Elena glanced at Caleb, who shrugged. "The offer stands, but no pressure." "I'd like that," Elena said, "if you're sure I won't be in the way." "You won't be in the way," Mia said with absolute certainty. Then she skipped off to supervise someone else's box placement. Later, after most of the heavy lifting was done and people had filtered out, Caleb and Elena stood on the small balcony attached to his new living room. The view wasn't much, mostly other buildings and a slice of sky, but it was his. Theirs in a way, since Elena had already started leaving things here. A toothbrush, some work clothes, the beginnings of integration. "This is surreal," Caleb said. 6 months ago I was loading trucks and barely making rent. Now I'm consulting on workforce development and dating a woman who terrifies corporate executives. I don't terrify all of them, just the ones who deserve it. Fair distinction. Elena leaned against the railing. Do you ever regret it, saying yes to my initial offer? No. Do you regret making it? Not even a little. She turned to face him. You know what I've learned from all this? What? That the things we're taught to value, credentials, status, traditional success markers, they're mostly bullshit. What actually matters is whether someone shows up, whether they're honest, whether they see you as a person instead of a resource. She paused. You showed up, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to walk away. That's worth more than any resume. You showed up too, fought for me when you didn't have to. Of course I did. You matter to me. The simplicity of those words hit harder than any elaborate declaration could have. Caleb pulled her close, and they stood there watching the city lights come on as evening settled over Seattle. Two people who'd found each other in unlikely circumstances and decided to build something real from it. Inside, Mia was singing off-key while unpacking her books. Mrs. Chen was organizing the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The apartment smelled like cardboard and new paint and possibility. It wasn't perfect. Caleb's consulting work was still part-time, still not enough to fully support them without the events he attended with Elena. Money remained a constant calculation, less desperate than before, but never completely absent from his thoughts. Elena still struggled with work-life balance, still sometimes disappeared into her company's demands for days at a time. They still argued about small things, still had moments of frustration and miscommunication, but they were building something. Not a fairy tale, not a solution to all their problems, just a partnership between two imperfect people trying to do better than they'd done alone. And that, Caleb had learned, was enough. More than enough, actually, because the alternative to imperfect togetherness was perfect isolation, and he'd had enough of that to last a lifetime. Mia appeared on the balcony, squeezing between them. Daddy, Mrs. Chen says we should order pizza because nobody wants to cook tonight. Can we? Can Elena stay? Caleb looked at Elena, who smiled and nodded. Yeah, Bug. Elena can stay. Good. Because she promised to tell me about the time she met an astronaut, and I want to hear all about it. I never said I met an astronaut, Elena protested. But you did, right? Because you go to fancy parties and astronauts go to fancy parties, so you probably met one. That's not exactly how it works, but I'll see what stories I can come up with. Mia grinned and ran back inside to relay the pizza decision to Mrs. Chen. Caleb and Elena followed more slowly, hand in hand, stepping into the warmth and chaos of a life that was messy and complicated and exactly what both of them needed. Because at the end of the day, that's what it came down to. Not the money or the status or the dramatic confrontations with people like Marcus Trent. Just the choice to show up for each other, to build something real in a world that often rewarded performance over authenticity. Caleb had started this journey broke and desperate, willing to take a risk on a strange offer from a woman who intimidated him. He'd ended it with more than just financial stability. He'd ended it with community, purpose, and the knowledge that he deserved to take up space in rooms that had previously excluded people like him. And Elena had started it isolated by her own success, convinced that vulnerability was weakness and connections were liabilities. She'd ended it learning that strength could look like asking for help, that success meant nothing without people to share it with, that sometimes the best business decision was the one that prioritized being human over being profitable. They'd both changed, grown, become something different than what they'd been when that word, baby, had slipped out in a ballroom and changed everything. The pizza arrived. They ate on the floor of the living room because the furniture wasn't fully arranged yet, Mia chattering about her new school and her new room and all the possibilities of this new chapter. Mrs. Chen told stories about her own moves over the years, the apartments and houses and cities she'd lived in. Elena listened to all of it with genuine interest, asking questions, engaging like she belonged here. And maybe she did. Maybe belonging was just this, showing up, participating, choosing to be part of something bigger than yourself. Later, after Mia was in bed and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Caleb and Elena finished unpacking the kitchen in comfortable silence, putting dishes in cabinets, organizing silverware, creating order from chaos. Small tasks that felt significant because they were doing them together. "I should probably head home," Elena said around midnight, though she didn't move toward the door. "You could stay. Guest room's set up." "Is that what you want?" "I want you to do whatever feels right." She considered this, then nodded. "Okay, I'll stay." They stood in the kitchen of Caleb's new apartment, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the physical evidence of forward motion, and smiled at each other like they'd just figured out something important. Because they had. They'd figured out that life wasn't about reaching some perfect destination where all the problems were solved and everything was easy. Life was about the stumbling journey towards something better, surrounded by people who made the stumbling worthwhile. And that was a lesson neither of them had known they needed until they found it in each other. Outside, Seattle carried on with its noise and lights and endless motion. Inside, two people who'd been alone for too long settled into a new kind of normal, imperfect, uncertain, and full of possibility. Caleb checked on Mia one last time before bed. She was asleep with her Neptune poster tacked to the wall above her, dreaming whatever dreams 6-year-olds had about space and turtles and the future stretching out ahead of them. He thought about his own future, about the possibilities that had opened up in the past 6 months. The consulting work, the relationship with Elena, the slow climb toward stability that felt sustainable instead of precarious. It wasn't the life he'd imagined when he was loading trucks and calculating whether he could afford groceries and rent in the same week. It was better. Not because it was easier, though it was, but because it was built on foundations that actually mattered. Honesty, effort, the willingness to be vulnerable and imperfect and human. In the guest room, Elena was already asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. Caleb stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her, grateful for the strange series of events that had brought them here. Then he went to his own room, climbed into bed in an apartment that was his, in a life that was his, and let sleep claim him with something close to contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more complications, the ongoing work of building something sustainable from imperfect materials. But tonight, he'd take the win. Take the moment of peace and possibility. Because that's all anyone could really do. Take the moments as they came, show up as honestly as possible, and trust that the stumbling forward was better than standing still. And in the end, maybe that was enough.